Welcome to Moonlight Myths, where soothing stories guide you gently into sleep. I'm so glad you're here. If you enjoy this journey, I'd love for you to like and subscribe so we can share many more peaceful nights together. Now settle in, let yourself relax, and allow the story to carry you into the sweetest dreams. In the quietness of ancient days, when prophets walked between the world of flesh and the realm of spirit, there came a moment of profound unveiling. It happened to a man named Isaiah, in a time when kingdoms rose and fell like breath itself. And in that sacred pause between waking and something beyond waking, the heavens opened. Let yourself settle into this story, as one might settle into the softest of cushions, and hear of what was seen. The vision began not with thunder or earthquake, though such things often announce the divine. No, it began with a simple opening, as though a veil that had always hung between earth and heaven was gently, almost tenderly, drawn aside. And there, in that space beyond space, Isaiah beheld the throne. But it was not the throne itself that first captured his attention. It was what stood above it. Beings of such otherworldly presence that the prophet struggled to find words in any human tongue to describe them. These were the Seraphim. And they hovered there, in positions of eternal attendance, above the very seat of the divine. The Hebrew scriptures, in all their collected wisdom and chronicles of wonder, mention these beings by name in only one place. This single passage, preserved in the 6th chapter of the book that bears Isaiah's name, offers the only explicit description of seraphim as heavenly entities. It is as though the text itself understood that some mysteries should be encountered sparingly, like glimpses of stars through passing clouds, brief, brilliant, and all the more precious for their rarity. In this vision, the seraphim were positioned above God's throne. Not beside it, not before it, but above, a detail that speaks to something about their nature and their purpose. They were attendants, yes, but also guardians of holiness itself. Witnesses to a glory too immense for mortal eyes, yet there they remained, steadfast in their celestial vigil. And they were not silent. From their position above the throne, the seraphim called out to one another. Their voices carried across the heavenly expanse, creating a kind of sacred echo, a celestial antiphon that reverberated through every corner of the divine chamber. And what they proclaimed was this: Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. 3 times they declared the holiness of God. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, a triple acclamation that would echo through millennia to come. Holy, holy, holy. The words were both simple and inexhaustible, like a spring that never runs dry. In Hebrew, the word is kadosh, set apart, consecrated, utterly other. And the seraphim sang it in triplicate, as though one declaration could never contain the vastness of what they perceived. This was not mere praise. This was proclamation. This was the fundamental truth of existence being spoken aloud by beings who dwelt in its very presence. The Lord of hosts, commander of heavenly armies, sovereign over all that is, possessed a holiness that required threefold utterance, as though the seraphim themselves needed to circle around it with words, approaching from 3 directions, to gesture even remotely toward its fullness. As you rest now, perhaps you can imagine that sound. Not loud, necessarily, but all-encompassing. A voice like wind through canyons, like the hum of the world itself, like the deepest peace calling to the deepest peace within your own being. Holy, holy, holy. This vision that Isaiah experienced belongs to a particular kind of sacred literature. Scholars of ancient texts recognize it as a throne vision, a genre of mystical encounter that appears in several places across the scriptures. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes another throne vision, equally strange and wonderful, filled with wheels within wheels and creatures covered with eyes. In the Christian book of Revelation, yet another throne vision unfolds, complete with heavenly beings crying out worship day and night without ceasing. These visions share certain qualities. They all involve the throne of the divine. They all include mysterious beings who serve as witnesses and worshippers. They all struggle with the limits of human language to describe what lies beyond ordinary perception. And they all seem to exist at the boundary between what can be told and what must remain mystery. But Isaiah's vision has its own particular power. Perhaps it is the directness of it, the simplicity of the seraphim's cry. Perhaps it is the way the prophet positions himself within the scene, not as a distant observer but as a participant, overwhelmed and undone by what he witnesses. Or perhaps it is simply that this vision gives us the seraphim themselves, creatures whose very name would become synonymous with celestial fire and divine love. The cry of the seraphim, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, did not remain contained within that single moment of vision. Like ripples spreading across still water, it moved outward through time. The words filled heaven and earth with the glory of God. The text tells us that the foundations of the thresholds shook at the sound of their voices, and the house was filled with smoke, signs that the divine presence had drawn near, that heaven and earth were touching in that instant. But the echo continued even beyond that. The triple acclamation of holiness became woven into the very fabric of both Jewish and Christian worship. In Jewish liturgy, it appears as the Kaddish, a prayer that invites the congregation to join their voices with the angels, to add human praise to the song that Seraphim have sung since time immemorial. In Christian tradition, it becomes the Sanctus, sung or spoken in countless services across countless years, in languages from Latin to English to Swahili and beyond. When worshippers in a small church or a grand cathedral sing Holy, 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 they are adding their voices to the Seraphim song. They are, in a sense, entering Isaiah's vision. They are standing for a moment, where heaven and earth meet, and joining the eternal chorus that declares the holiness of God. Let that thought rest with you as you rest yourself. Across centuries and continents, in moments of joy and sorrow, in times of peace and times of trial, human voices have joined with angelic voices to proclaim that same truth. Holy, holy, holy. You are connected to that great chain of praise, that river of worship that flows from the throne room of heaven through all of time. The seraphim in Isaiah's vision were not abstract concepts or distant symbols. They were present, active, vocal beings. They had a role to play in the divine economy, the great ordering of heaven and earth. They were proclaimers, heralds of holiness, guardians of the mystery that stood at the center of all things. And in their proclamation, they performed a kind of service. They named what was true. They oriented heaven and earth toward the center, toward the holiness of God. In a sense, their song was an act of cosmic alignment, reminding all of creation, seen and unseen, of the fundamental reality upon which everything else rests. As Isaiah witnessed this scene, he was changed. The vision did not leave him as it found him. But that is a story for the seraphim themselves to tell more fully, how they interact with those who encounter them, how their fire purifies, how their presence transforms. For now, it is enough to know that they are there, above the throne, singing their ancient song. In this quiet moment, as you prepare for sleep or simply for rest, consider the seraphim in their eternal vigil. They do not tire. They do not falter. They simply are, and they simply sing. Holy, holy, holy. There is something deeply restful in that, in the knowledge that some things continue, unchanging and true, while we ourselves surrender to sleep and dreams. The vision opens. The seraphim appear. Their song fills heaven and earth. And in the hearing of it, even filtered through centuries and translations and the limits of mortal understanding, there is an invitation. To be still. To be at peace. To recognize that holiness exists, that it is real and present, and that beings of flame and devotion attend it always. As the night deepens, or the day finds its quiet center, let the seraphim's cry become a gentle refrain in your mind. Not loud or insistent, but soft as a lullaby. Holy, holy, holy. A triple blessing. A threefold assurance. A song that has no end, sung by beings who need no rest, so that you, in your need for rest, might find peace in their vigil. The throne stands. The seraphim hover. The song continues. And you, listener, are invited simply to witness, to hear, and to let the ancient vision work its gentle peace upon your spirit as you drift toward sleep. In the stillness of contemplation, when the mind turns toward mysteries that exist beyond the ordinary boundaries of sight and sense, a question naturally arises. What are these beings called seraphim? What is their nature, their essence, their form? The answer, like all things that touch the divine, is both simple and inexhaustible. Let yourself settle deeper now, and listen as the nature of the seraphim unfolds like petals opening to moonlight. The very name seraphim carries within it a clue to their nature. In the ancient Hebrew tongue, the language in which Isaiah first recorded his vision, the word is saraph. And saraph means burning ones. Not beings who merely glow with light, but beings whose essence is flame itself. Burning ones. Creatures of fire and radiance, whose nature is heat and brilliance and the kind of light that purifies even as it illuminates. This name is not arbitrary. Names, in the ancient world, were never merely labels. They were revelations. To know the name of something was to know its character, its purpose, its deepest truth. And so when we learn that these beings are called burning ones, we learn something fundamental about what they are. They are fire. They are radiance. They are the kind of light that cannot be looked upon directly without being changed by the encounter. Their very nature suggests transformation, for fire transforms everything it touches, reducing the dross and revealing what is pure. Fire warms, but fire also consumes. Fire illuminates, but fire also demands respect. And the seraphim, as burning ones, embody all of this. This name, Seraph, suggests something else as well. It suggests that their nature is not purely humanoid. Fire does not have arms and legs in the way a human body does. Fire moves differently. Fire exists differently. And so the seraphim, in being called burning ones, are revealed as beings whose form might be something other, something stranger and more wonderful than a simple human shape with wings attached. They are creatures of another order entirely. Entities whose existence speaks of realms where matter and spirit interweave in ways unfamiliar to earthly life, where form follows function in patterns that serve purposes beyond mortal understanding. As you rest here, perhaps you can imagine them not as statues or paintings, but as living flame, dancing, moving, radiant with an inner heat that never diminishes and never destroys them. Burning ones, eternal in their fire. Isaiah, in his vision, offers us more than just the name. He gives us details, precious few, but each one laden with meaning. He tells us that each seraph has 6 wings. 6 wings. Not 2, as birds possess. Not 4, as some other heavenly beings are described to have. But 6, 3 pairs, each with its own distinct purpose. Consider this as you settle into deeper calm. 6 wings. What might that mean? What might that reveal? The first pair of wings, Isaiah tells us, the seraphim used to cover their faces. Picture this, beings of flame, dwelling in the presence of holiness itself, yet they veil their own faces. Why? The text suggests an answer: reverence. Even the seraphim, burning ones who exist in a state closer to the divine than any mortal can imagine, even they cannot look directly upon the fullness of God's glory without covering their faces. This gesture of veiling speaks to something profound. Holiness, true holiness, is not something to be stared at with casual familiarity. Even beings of fire recognize the necessity of appropriate distance, appropriate humility before what is utterly other. The seraphim, with 2 wings covering their faces, express in their very posture a truth that runs through all authentic encounters with the sacred. There must be reverence. There must be awe. There must be recognition that one stands before something infinitely greater than oneself. And so they hover there, faces veiled, not in fear but in worship. Not in hiding, but in honor. The burning ones recognize what burns brighter still. The second pair of wings the seraphim used to cover their feet. Again, a gesture rich with meaning. In the ancient Near East, the feet were considered the lowest part of the body, the part that touched the earth and dust. To cover one's feet in the presence of holiness was an expression of humility. It was a recognition of one's own comparative lowliness, even when one's nature was flame and fire and celestial glory. The seraphim, then, are not proud. They do not glory in their own radiance. They do not presume upon their position above the throne. Instead, with 2 wings, they cover their feet, acknowledging that even they, burning ones, proclaimers of holiness, are servants. Even they stand humbly before the infinite. There is something deeply restful in this image. Even the mightiest beings in heaven express humility. Even the brightest fires acknowledge their source. And if the seraphim cover their feet in humble service, how much more might we, in our own small sphere, embrace the peace that comes from knowing we need not prove ourselves, need not inflate our own importance, but can simply be what we are, creatures in the presence of mystery. Let that thought settle over you like a blanket. Humility is not weakness. It is wisdom. And even the seraphim know this. The third pair of wings, the final pair, the seraphim use for flight. With these wings they move. With these wings they serve. The text suggests continual motion, continual service, continual response to the divine will. They are not static beings, frozen in one position. They are dynamic, active, engaged in perpetual ministry. Flight represents many things: freedom, service, readiness. The seraphim, with their 2 wings of flight, are always ready, always available, always in motion according to the purposes of heaven. They do not tire. They do not require rest as mortal creatures do. They simply continue, borne aloft by wings that were made for this very purpose. And yet, notice the balance. 4 wings for reverence and humility, 2 for service and flight. Even in the distribution of their wings, there is a lesson. Worship and humility come before action, posture before movement, being before doing. The Seraphim teach, even in their anatomy, that right action flows from right relationship, from reverence toward God and humility about oneself. As you allow yourself to drift, perhaps into sleep, perhaps simply into deeper quiet, consider this balance. How much of life is spent in frantic motion, wings of service beating constantly, while the wings of reverence and humility remain folded and unused? The Seraphim show another way. A way where worship and humble recognition create the foundation from which true service can emerge. Now, it is important to know that in early Jewish art, there is no fixed visual standard for what seraphim should look like. The ancient peoples did not create paintings or sculptures that established a canonical appearance for these beings. Unlike angels, which gradually acquired certain conventional forms in artistic representation, seraphim remained elusive, undefined, resistant to being captured in stone or paint or mosaic. Why might this be? Perhaps because fire is difficult to capture. Perhaps because the nature of burning ones defies easy representation. Perhaps because Isaiah's description, while vivid, leaves much to the imagination, and the imagination, encountering beings of such otherworldly nature, naturally hesitates to pin them down with too much specificity. The absence of a fixed visual tradition for seraphim in early Jewish art allows them to remain mysterious, allows them to continue to be primarily what they are in Isaiah's vision, beings encountered in prophetic ecstasy, beings described in words of wonder, beings whose truest form might exceed any image we could create. Much later, centuries after Isaiah walked the earth, a visual tradition did begin to emerge. Christian imagination, building on Isaiah's brief description, began to depict seraphim as 6-winged humanoid figures. These images show beings with human faces and bodies, but with 3 pairs of majestic wings, 2 covering the face, 2 covering the feet, and 2 spread for flight. These depictions are beautiful. They have graced churches and illuminated manuscripts and inspired countless believers across the centuries. Angels of flame, human in form but superhuman in splendor, their 6 wings marking them as seraphim, their expression serene with eternal worship. But it is well to remember that these images come from imagination working on Isaiah's words. They are interpretations, not photographs. They are attempts to make visible what is, by nature, difficult to see. The 6-winged humanoid seraph of Christian art is a creation of faith and creativity, a way of making concrete what Isaiah left wonderfully mysteriously, almost frustratingly vague. And there is wisdom in that vagueness, that resistance to fixed form. The burning ones, creatures whose very name speaks of fire and transformation, perhaps ought not be frozen into any single appearance. Perhaps they ought to remain somewhat beyond our grasp, somewhat resistant to our attempts to domesticate them with familiar forms. After all, fire moves. Fire changes. Fire dances and flickers and never holds quite the same shape twice. And if the seraphim are burning ones, then perhaps their appearance is not meant to be fixed at all, but rather to shimmer and shift like flame itself, now seeming one way, now another, always beautiful, always fearsome, always just beyond the reach of complete understanding. As you rest now, in this moment between waking and sleep, let the seraphim remain mysterious. Let them be burning ones in your mind's eye, radiant, reverent, humble, ever-serving. 6 wings of purpose. Fire that never consumes itself. Beings whose nature is to burn with love and holiness and devotion, hovering above the throne, singing their eternal song. What are seraphim? They are burning ones. They are beings of 6 wings and triple purpose. They are creatures of reverence and humility and ceaseless service. They are fire made into worship, flame shaped by love, radiance ordered toward holiness. And they are, finally, beyond our full comprehension, which is as it should be. For in their mystery, they remind us that heaven holds wonders that exceed our categorizing, beauties that overflow our understanding, and presences that invite us not to mastery but to awe. Let them remain fire in your imagination. Let them remain mystery in your heart. And let that mystery bring not anxiety but peace, the peace of knowing that some things are too glorious to be grasped, and that this very fact is a gift. The burning ones continue their vigil. Their 6 wings move in patterns older than mountains. And you resting here, are invited simply to honor them from afar, to marvel at them in imagination, and to let their fiery devotion kindle in you a small flame of peace as you drift toward sleep. There are layers to every sacred story, like veils upon veils, each one revealing something true while hinting at deeper truths still hidden beneath. The Seraphim, burning ones who hover above the divine throne, carry with them echoes of older stories, older images, older encounters with the numinous and the strange. To understand them fully, or as fully as mortal understanding allows, one must venture into these deeper layers, where fire and serpent and ancient guardians interweave in surprising ways. Settle yourself now, and let these mysteries unfold gently, like a flower opening in moonlight, taking their time, asking nothing of you but patient listening. The word seraph, which gives us seraphim, appears elsewhere in the Hebrew scriptures. And when it does, it refers to something that at first seems quite different from the six-winged beings of Isaiah's vision. In other passages, seraph is used to describe fiery serpents. Serpents that burn, or perhaps serpents associated with venom that burns like fire through the veins. Creatures encountered in the wilderness, dangerous and deadly, remembered in the collective memory of the people as agents of both threat and divine judgment. Fiery serpents, burning snakes, seraph. The same word, the same root. And this connection opens a doorway into understanding the seraphim in a new and deeper way. Why would the same term describe both celestial beings of glory and earthly serpents of danger? The answer lies not in confusion, but in the nature of ancient language and ancient imagination. Words in the old tongues often carried multiple meanings, multiple associations, all of them connected by threads of symbolic resonance. Fire, danger, power, transformation, protection. All of these themes could cluster around a single word, creating a rich semantic field where serpent and seraph, though different in form, shared something essential in their nature. Consider the serpent. In the ancient world, serpents were symbols of many things. They represented danger, yes, their bite could kill, their venom could cause torment that felt like inner fire. But they also represented wisdom, for they moved close to the earth and seemed to possess secret knowledge. They represented transformation, for they shed their skins and emerged renewed. They represented both life and death, healing and harm, protection and threat. And they represented, often, the divine. Throughout the ancient Near East, in cultures that surrounded and influenced the Hebrew people, serpents appeared as sacred beings. They guarded temples and thresholds. They coiled around the staffs of healing gods. They defended treasures and marked boundaries between the profane and the holy. Dragon-like creatures, serpentine guardians, winged serpents, these figures populated the mythological landscape of the ancient world. Some scholars, peering into these ancient connections, have suggested that the seraphim imagery in Isaiah's vision may have its origins in these older guardian figures. That the six-winged beings hovering above God's throne may be, in some sense, descendants of serpent-like or dragon-like protectors from earlier Near Eastern religious imagination. This is not to say that Isaiah simply borrowed wholesale from neighboring cultures. Rather, it suggests something more subtle and more interesting. It suggests that religious imagery evolves, adapts, transforms, taking shapes and symbols from the wider culture and reshaping them, infusing them with new meaning, directing them toward new purposes. The ancient world was full of guardian beings, creatures stationed at doorways, at boundaries, at the edges of sacred spaces. In Mesopotamia, Lamassu, winged bulls or lions with human heads, stood watch at palace gates. In Egypt, sphinxes guarded tombs and temples. Serpentine dragons protected divine treasures. These were liminal beings, creatures of threshold and boundary, possessing mixed natures that marked them as belonging neither fully to earth nor fully to heaven, but to the between spaces where divine and human, sacred and profane, met and mingled. Isaiah's seraphim, hovering above the throne, performing their duties of proclamation and purification, fit comfortably within this broader pattern of guardian beings. They watch. They protect. They maintain the holiness of the space they inhabit. They mark a boundary, in their case, the boundary between the divine throne and all that is not the divine throne, between absolute holiness and everything else. But Isaiah has adapted the imagery. If the seraphim do indeed draw on older guardian traditions, serpentine, dragon-like, strange in form, Isaiah has transformed them into winged court officials. Beings with wings for covering and flying. Beings with voices for proclamation. Beings whose service is rendered through worship rather than merely through watchful presence. This adaptation, this transformation of older imagery, is itself beautiful. It shows how religious imagination works not by wholesale invention from nothing, but by taking what is known, what is familiar, and reshaping it to serve new visions, new encounters, new revelations of the divine. The seraphim feel both familiar and strange in the biblical vision precisely because they are both familiar and strange. They echo forms that existed before, while becoming something new and particular to Isaiah's encounter. Let yourself rest in this thought. Nothing emerges from nowhere. Every revelation builds on what came before, even as it transcends it. Every encounter with the divine carries within it threads of older encounters, older stories, older attempts to name what cannot be fully named. The connection between seraphim and serpents, then, is not a contradiction or a confusion. It is a clue, a hint at the deeper nature of these beings. Perhaps the seraphim, in their truest form, do retain something serpentine. Perhaps their movement is more like coiling than walking. Perhaps their bodies are less humanoid than we imagine, more elongated, more fluid, more strange. Or perhaps the connection is purely linguistic and symbolic, the seraphim called burning ones, just as fiery serpents are called burning ones, not because they share physical form but because they share certain qualities. Both are dangerous to approach carelessly. Both demand respect. Both are associated with purification through fire or through venom that burns like fire. Both serve, in their different ways, as agents of the divine will. The image of serpents as guardians might help us understand why the seraphim are positioned as they are, above the throne, in a place of watching and protection. They are not merely worshippers, though they worship. They are not merely messengers, though they may carry messages. They are guardians of holiness itself, ensuring that the sacred remains sacred, that the boundary between divine and profane remains clear and sharp. In this role, they resemble the guardian serpents of old, the dragons who coiled around treasures, the serpents who marked the entrances to sacred groves and holy mountains. But they have been elevated, transformed, given wings and voices and a place in the very throne room of heaven. The old imagery has been taken up into something new. This is why the seraphim feel both familiar and strange when we encounter them in Isaiah's vision. They tap into something ancient in human religious consciousness, the sense that holy places require guardians, that boundaries between worlds require beings who can inhabit both sides, that the divine needs protection not from external threat but from casual profanation, from the kind of careless approach that cannot recognize what it stands before. We know such guardians from stories and dreams. We carry images of them in some deep part of our imagination. And when Isaiah describes the seraphim, something in us recognizes them even as something else in us finds them utterly foreign. Familiar and strange. Known and unknown. Human and inhuman. Earthly serpents and heavenly flames. As you let yourself drift deeper into rest, consider this interweaving of images. The ancient world was more comfortable with fluidity of form than the modern world tends to be. A being could be serpent and not serpent. Could be fire and creature. Could be guardian and worshipper. The boundaries were softer, the categories less rigid. The seraphim, with their possible connections to serpent imagery, invite us into that older, more fluid way of imagining the sacred. They resist being pinned down into a single, stable form. They shimmer between possibilities, now appearing as humanoid figures with 6 glorious wings, now suggesting something more reptilian, more elemental, more strange. And perhaps this resistance to fixed form is itself part of their truth. Perhaps beings of fire and beings of sacred guardianship should not be too easily categorized. Perhaps they ought to retain their strangeness, their ability to surprise, their refusal to be domesticated by our need for clear visual references. The Near Eastern guardian imagery, the winged bulls, the sphinxes, the dragon serpents, all share this quality of mixed nature. They combine elements that do not ordinarily go together. Wings and serpent bodies. Human faces and lion bodies. Fire and flesh. And in this combination, they signal their role as threshold beings, creatures who exist at the boundaries, who can mediate between realms because they participate in multiple realms simultaneously. Isaiah's seraphim, whether or not they are literally serpentine in form, certainly function as threshold beings. They exist in the immediate presence of God, yet they can interact with prophets. They are wholly oriented toward divine holiness, yet they are capable of touching earthly lips with coals from a heavenly altar. They burn but are not consumed. They are flame but possess agency and voice and intention. This liminality, this in-betweenness, connects them to the broader ancient tradition of guardian figures. And if that guardian tradition includes serpentine or dragon-like beings, then the seraphim take their place in a long line of such creatures, not as imitations but as the highest and truest expression of what those older images were reaching toward. So when we think of seraphim, we might allow ourselves to think of fire, yes. And wings, certainly. But also, perhaps, we might allow a hint of serpent to enter our imagination. Not the small garden snake, but the great serpent of myth, powerful, dangerous, wise, ancient. The kind of creature that could guard the tree of life in Eden. The kind of creature that, lifted up on a pole in the wilderness, could bring healing even through the symbol of what caused the wound. Serpent and seraph. Seraph and seraph. The same word pointing to mysteries that, while distinct, share something essential in their nature. Both burn. Both guard. Both serve purposes that humans can barely understand. Both inspire awe and caution and wonder. Let this interweaving of images rest gently in your awareness as you settle into stillness. The seraphim are not simple. They are not merely pretty angels with extra wings. They are beings whose origins reach back into the deep past of human religious imagination, into times when serpents were sacred and dragons guarded the holy, when boundaries between heaven and earth were marked by creatures of mixed and marvelous nature. And Isaiah, in his vision, encountered them not as relics of a superstitious past, but as living presences in the court of heaven. Burning ones. Guardian worshippers. Beings of fire and wing and perhaps, just perhaps, of coil and scale as well, transformed by divine purpose into something both ancient and new, both familiar and forever strange. They hover there still, above the throne, carrying within their being all these layers of meaning and imagery. And you, settling into sleep, can rest knowing that the holy is guarded by such beings, powerful, ancient, mysterious, and absolutely devoted to the sacred center around which all things turn. There are moments in sacred stories when heaven reaches down to touch earth, when the distance between the divine and the mortal collapses into a single point of contact. In Isaiah's vision, such a moment arrives not with grand pronouncements or overwhelming displays of power, but with a simple, deliberate act. A seraph moves. A coal is lifted. Lips are touched. And in that touch, everything changes. Let yourself settle into this story of transformation, this tale of fire that purifies rather than destroys, and feel the ancient peace of knowing that holiness can cleanse without consuming. The vision has unfolded. Isaiah has seen the throne. He has heard the seraphim crying out their triple proclamation of holiness. The foundations have shaken. The smoke has filled the temple. And now, in the presence of such overwhelming glory, Isaiah becomes aware of his own condition. He cries out in anguish, "Woe is me! I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Unclean lips. This is what Isaiah names as his deepest problem in this moment. Not unclean hands, though surely those too could stand cleansing. Not an unclean heart, though the heart's purity matters deeply. But lips, the organs of speech, the instruments through which words emerge, the means by which a prophet must do his work. Isaiah has seen holiness itself, and in that seeing, he has become painfully aware of his own inadequacy. How can lips that have spoken carelessly, thoughtlessly, perhaps even sinfully, now speak words on behalf of the Holy One? How can a mouth accustomed to the ordinary traffic of human conversation suddenly become a conduit for divine message? The gap seems unbridgeable. The disparity seems absolute. And yet, one of the seraphim moves. Among those burning ones who hover eternally above the throne, who cover their faces and their feet in reverence and humility, who proclaim without ceasing the holiness of God, one of them responds to Isaiah's cry. One of them acts. The seraph flies to the altar. In the heavenly vision, there is an altar, that most sacred of furnishings, the place where sacrifice meets divinity, where offerings ascend as smoke and prayer. And on this altar there burns a fire, not an ordinary fire, but the fire of heaven itself, the fire that represents God's presence, God's purity, God's transforming power. From this altar, the seraph takes a burning coal. Picture this moment. A being of flame reaches into flame and draws forth a coal, a stone perhaps, or a piece of fuel, glowing with heat, radiating the kind of intense warmth that would sear ordinary flesh in an instant. The seraph holds this coal, does not drop it, does not flinch from its heat. For the seraph itself is fire, and fire does not fear fire. The seraph flies toward Isaiah, carries the coal across the space between the altar and the prophet, and then with deliberate care, the seraph touches the coal to Isaiah's lips. Let that image rest in your mind as you rest your body. The burning coal meeting mortal flesh. The heat of heaven making contact with the mouth of a man who has just declared himself unclean, unworthy, lost. One might expect this touch to destroy. Fire consumes. Heat sears. A burning coal should char and wound and leave nothing but injury in its wake. But this coal, carried by a seraph from the heavenly altar, does something else entirely. It purifies. The seraph speaks as the coal touches Isaiah's lips. Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out. Not burned away through suffering. Not earned through penance. Simply removed, cleansed, taken away by the touch of holy fire mediated through a being whose very nature is flame. This is purification. This is the removal of what separates, what makes unclean, what stands between the human and the divine commission. The coal does not hurt Isaiah, or if it does, the text does not mention pain, only the result. The result is cleanness, readiness, fitness for purpose. The seraph, in this moment, functions as something more than a worshipper or guardian. The seraph becomes a mediator of holiness itself. The seraph takes what belongs to the altar, the burning coal, symbol of God's purifying presence, and applies it to the prophet. The seraph bridges the gap between the transcendent holiness of God and the imminent need of the human who stands before that holiness. This is not a small thing. In the religious imagination of ancient Israel, holiness was dangerous. To approach the holy carelessly, in a state of ritual or moral impurity, was to risk death. The holy did not tolerate the profane. The clean could not coexist with the unclean. And yet here, through the mediation of the seraph, holiness touches humanity not to destroy but to transform. The role of mediator is a priestly role. In the temple cult of ancient Israel, priests stood between the people and God. They performed the rituals of cleansing. They offered the sacrifices. They maintained the boundaries of holiness while also making it possible for people to approach the divine safely, in states of appropriate purity. The seraph here performs a priestly function, takes fire from the altar, the priest's domain, and uses it to cleanse. The seraph makes it possible for Isaiah to stand in the divine presence, to hear the divine question, "Whom shall I send?" and to respond, "Here am I, send me." Without the seraph's act, Isaiah would remain paralyzed by his sense of unworthiness. With the seraph's act, Isaiah becomes capable of receiving his commission, of becoming the prophet he is called to be. As you breathe slowly, perhaps preparing for sleep or simply resting in this quiet moment, consider the beauty of this pattern. Holiness that cleanses. Fire that heals. Touch that transforms rather than destroys. The seraph knows how to handle sacred fire. Knows how to bring it to bear on human need without overwhelming that need with destructive power. The burning coal from the altar carries layers of meaning. The altar is where sacrifice occurs, where the life of an animal is given, where blood is poured out, where atonement is made. In the temple, the altar is the focal point of the entire sacrificial system, the place where human sin and divine mercy meet in the complex choreography of ritual purity. When the seraph takes a coal from this altar, all of these associations come with it. The coal represents sacrifice, atonement, the covering or removal of sin, the making clean of what was unclean. And when this coal touches Isaiah's lips, it performs in a moment what the temple rituals perform through elaborate process. It makes the worshipper fit to approach God. This connection between the seraph's act and priestly ritual is important. It shows that heavenly worship and earthly worship are not separate realms but are intimately connected. What happens at the heavenly altar has implications for what happens at earthly altars. What the seraphim proclaim in heaven, holiness, 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 must somehow be made accessible, approachable, available to humans who are not themselves holy. And this is done through mediation. Through beings who can handle the holy without being destroyed by it. Through rituals that channel divine power in ways that cleanse rather than consume. Through coals from altars, through the touch of flame, through words spoken over lips that have been purified. The seraph's act prepares Isaiah for his work. Once his lips are cleansed, he can speak. Once his guilt is removed, he can hear the divine voice clearly and respond to it. The purification is not an end in itself but a means to an end, the commissioning of a prophet who will carry difficult messages to a difficult people. Holiness, in this vision, is not simply about God remaining separate, distant, untouchable. Holiness is also about God reaching toward humanity, making contact possible, enabling relationship and communication despite the vast disparity between divine and human nature. And the seraphim participate in this reaching. They are not barriers but bridges. Not walls but doorways. Their role as mediators of holiness means they stand in that liminal space, that threshold between heaven and earth, between the utterly holy and the trying to be holy, between the fire that would destroy and the fire that purifies. They know how to modulate divine power, how to bring it to bear appropriately, how to touch mortal flesh with heavenly flame and leave that flesh not scorched but cleansed. Let this thought bring you peace. There are beings whose entire existence is devoted to mediating holiness, to making possible what would otherwise be impossible, contact between the divine and the human without destruction of the human. The Seraphim, burning ones, know how to handle fire, and they use that knowledge in service of transformation. After the seraph touches Isaiah's lips, the prophet is changed. Not in his essential nature, he remains human, remains himself, but in his readiness, his capacity, his fitness for the task ahead. He can now speak for God because his speech has been purified. He can now carry divine words because his mouth has been made clean. This is what the seraph's act accomplishes. It is not magical in the sense of arbitrary or incomprehensible power. It is priestly in the sense of ritual action that affects real change, real cleansing, real preparation. The coal from the altar, applied by the hand or wing of a seraph, does what it is meant to do. It purifies. It prepares. It makes ready. And in this, the seraph reveals another dimension of its nature and role. Not only worshipper, but also servant. Not only proclaimer of holiness, but also minister of that holiness to those who need it. The seraph moves between the altar and the prophet, between the source of fire and the recipient of fire's cleansing power, performing an act of mediation that makes Isaiah's prophetic ministry possible. As you rest here, perhaps you can imagine that touch. Not as burning, though the coal surely carried intense heat, but as transforming. As the kind of touch that removes what should not be there and leaves behind what should. A touch that prepares. A touch that enables. A touch that says, now you are ready. Now you can do what you could not do before. The seraph's act links heavenly worship with earthly priesthood, shows that the liturgy of heaven and the liturgy of earth are part of a single fabric, demonstrates that holiness, while transcendent and dangerous and demanding of reverence, is also approachable through proper mediation, proper ritual, proper preparation. The burning ones who cry holy, holy, holy without ceasing also know how to bring that holiness to bear on human need. They are not so caught up in their worship that they ignore the prophet's distress. They are attentive, responsive, ready to act when action is needed. One seraph moves. One coal is taken. One touch is given. And a prophet is born. A voice is enabled. A mission becomes possible. All through the mediation of a being of fire who knows how to handle the holy and how to share it without destroying the recipient. Let the seraphim's careful, purposeful act settle into your awareness as you settle into rest. There is order to holiness. There is process to transformation. There are beings whose wisdom and experience enable them to mediate what would otherwise overwhelm. And through their mediation, humans can encounter the divine, can be changed by that encounter, and can emerge not destroyed but renewed, not consumed but purified, not paralyzed but commissioned. The seraph returns, presumably, to its place above the throne. The coal has done its work. Isaiah's lips are clean. And the prophet, no longer crying woe is me, can now say here am I, send me. The gap has been bridged. The mediation is complete. And all of heaven watches as one more human being steps forward to carry divine words into the world, made fit for this task by the deliberate, careful, transforming touch of a burning one who knows the secret of purifying fire. In the great tapestry of existence, every thread has its purpose, every being its calling, every creature its proper work. And among all the orders of creation, visible and invisible, the seraphim have a work that is both simple and inexhaustible, both straightforward and infinitely deep. Their work is worship. Not worship as an occasional activity, not worship as one task among many, but worship as the very essence of their being, the constant occupation of their existence, the unending orientation of their entire nature. Settle into stillness now, and listen to the rhythm of eternal praise, the ceaseless song that fills heaven and gives shape to the life of the burning ones. At the core of what seraphim do lies a single central function: they worship. Continuously. Unceasingly. Without pause or interruption or the need for rest that mortal creatures require. The seraphim, hovering above the throne in Isaiah's vision, do not take shifts. They do not grow weary. They do not stop to catch their breath or to turn their attention elsewhere. Their worship is constant as the beating of a heart, as continuous as the flow of a river toward the sea. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. These words, or words like them, flow from the seraphim without end. They call out to one another, creating a kind of celestial antiphony, a heavenly conversation that consists entirely of proclaiming the holiness of God. One seraph cries out, and another responds. The first declares God's holiness, and the second affirms it. Back and forth, voice to voice, the proclamation continues, filling heaven with the acknowledgement of divine glory. This is not mindless repetition. This is not the mechanical recitation of beings who have forgotten why they speak these words. Rather, this is worship that springs from constant, immediate awareness of who God is. The seraphim see. They know. They exist in the direct presence of holiness itself, and their worship is the natural, inevitable response to what they perceive. Imagine standing before the ocean, watching waves roll toward shore. You would not tire of the waves. Each one is new, even though they all follow the same pattern. Each one carries the same water in a unique configuration. The seraphim's worship is like this, endlessly the same words, endlessly new awareness, endlessly fresh recognition of a truth that never grows stale because it never fully exhausts itself. Their worship is active. This is important to understand. When we think of worship, we might imagine stillness, quiet contemplation, peaceful meditation. And worship can include these things. But the seraphim's worship is dynamic, energetic, filled with movement and sound and the kind of intensity that shakes foundations. Their voices, when they cry out, cause the thresholds to shake. Their proclamation is not whispered but declared with power. They are not passive observers but active participants in the great work of heaven, which is the acknowledgement and celebration of God's nature. And they are fiery in their worship. Not just because they are burning ones by nature, though that is true, but because their devotion burns. Their love flames. Their commitment blazes with an intensity that knows no cooling, no diminishment, no flagging of energy. This is worship as conflagration. Worship as a fire that feeds on itself and grows brighter rather than burning out. The seraphim do not exhaust themselves in worship, they are sustained by it. Their fire is not consumed by their worship, it is expressed through it, channeled through it, given form and voice and purpose through it. As you rest here, breathing slowly, letting your body settle into comfort, consider what it might mean to be so fully oriented toward one thing. The seraphim have no divided attention. They are not distracted by lesser concerns. They do not wonder what else they might do or where else they might go. They are where they are meant to be, doing what they are meant to do, and this complete alignment brings not boredom but fulfillment, not weariness but endless energy. Later theological reflection on the seraphim would interpret their nature and work through the lens of love. The burning ones, these thinkers suggested, burn with love. Their fire is not merely literal or merely symbolic, it is the fire of absolute devotion, of love directed entirely and without reservation toward God. Burning love became a phrase associated with seraphim in medieval and later Christian thought. These beings, it was said, exemplify what it means to love God with all one's heart, soul, mind, and strength. They have no competing loves, no divided loyalties, no portion of themselves held back from the object of their devotion. They burn entirely with love, and that love expresses itself in ceaseless worship. This interpretation adds depth to our understanding of why the seraphim worship without ceasing. It is not duty that compels them, though they are dutiful. It is not fear that drives them, though they are appropriately reverent. It is love. Pure, uncomplicated, all-consuming love for the one they serve and praise and adore. Love does not tire of its beloved. Love finds joy in the simple presence of the one it loves. Love speaks words of praise not because it must but because it cannot help but do so. And the seraphim, burning with this kind of love, worship because worship is the overflow of what they feel, what they know, what they are. Their worship is also transformative. This too is essential to understand. The seraphim's constant proclamation of God's holiness does something. It does not merely describe reality, it shapes reality. Their worship fills heaven and earth with the glory of God. Their voices carry divine presence outward, making it manifest, making it known, making it felt. When the seraphim cry holy, the holiness they proclaim becomes more present, more palpable, more powerful. Their worship is performative, it brings about what it names. And in this sense, The seraphim participate actively in the work of making God's nature known throughout creation. This is worship as cosmic work. Worship as the maintenance of the fundamental order of existence. The seraphim, by their constant proclamation, remind all of creation, angels and humans, earth and heaven, all things visible and invisible, of the central truth upon which everything else depends: God is holy. Without this constant reminder, spoken by voices that know intimately what they speak of, creation might forget, might lose its orientation, might drift from its center. But the seraphim do not allow this forgetting. They call out ceaselessly, anchoring all of reality to the truth of divine holiness. Let this thought bring you peace as you sink deeper into rest. There are beings whose entire existence is devoted to maintaining the center, to proclaiming the truth that grounds everything else. The seraphim do not sleep. The seraphim do not pause. And because they do not, you can. You can rest, knowing that the great work of worship continues without you, that the proclamation of holiness goes on, that the center holds. The ceaseless nature of seraphic worship also speaks to the nature of holiness itself. Holiness is not a quality that can be fully captured in a single statement. It is not something that, once described, requires no further description. Holiness is infinite, inexhaustible, always worthy of further proclamation. The seraphim could worship for eternity, and they do, without ever exhausting the holiness of God. There is always more to see, more to know, more to declare. Their holy, holy, holy is not repetitive in the negative sense, because each utterance responds to a new perception, a fresh awareness, a deeper recognition of what God is. Think of it as gazing at a vast landscape from a mountaintop. You might look for hours and never see all there is to see. The light changes. Your eyes catch new details. Your understanding deepens. And if asked to describe what you see, you might find yourself returning again and again to the same basic words: beautiful, vast, amazing, not because you lack vocabulary, but because these words best capture the essential truth of what you perceive, and that truth remains constant even as your perception of it deepens. The seraphim's worship is like this. Holy is the word that fits. Holy is the truth they perceive. And they proclaim it without end, because holiness without end deserves proclamation without end. Their worship is not passive reception, but active participation. The seraphim do not merely bask in God's presence, though surely they do that. They do not merely enjoy the beatific vision, though surely they do that as well. They actively engage with what they perceive by naming it, declaring it, proclaiming it with voices that shake the foundations of heaven. This active dimension of worship matters. It suggests that worship is not about making ourselves small or silent or absent. It is about making ourselves present, vocal, engaged with the truth of who God is. The seraphim model this kind of worship, fully present, fully voiced, fully committed to the work of proclamation. And their worship is fiery in quality. Not cold, not detached, not merely intellectual. The seraphim burn, and their worship burns. There is passion here. Intensity. The kind of heat that transforms everything it touches. Their worship is not tepid or half-hearted or performed out of mere obligation. It blazes. This fiery quality connects to their nature as burning ones. Fire as an element is never static. It moves. It dances. It reaches upward. It consumes what fuels it and gives off light and heat in return. The seraphim's worship has these qualities. It moves, it reaches, it consumes their entire being in the sense that it is all they are and do, and it gives off light and heat that radiates throughout heaven. Later mystics and theologians would meditate on this burning quality and see in it a model for human devotion. We too, they suggested, are called to burn with love for God. Not literally, not to the point of physical destruction, but spiritually, emotionally, with the whole of our being. The seraphim show what this looks like in its purest form: love that holds nothing back, devotion that has no remainder, worship that encompasses the entirety of one's existence. As you drift now, perhaps towards sleep, perhaps simply into deeper quiet, let the image of the seraphim's eternal worship rest gently in your awareness. They are there, always there, crying out their praise. The work continues. The proclamation goes on. The burning love of the seraphim for God finds expression in words that never cease, in a song that has no ending. And in their ceaselessness, there is strange comfort. While you rest, they worship. While you sleep, they proclaim. While you let go of conscious awareness and drift into dreams, the seraphim remain at their post, maintaining the great work of heaven, ensuring that holiness is declared, that glory is proclaimed, that the center of all things is acknowledged and honored and praised. Their worship is both their gift to God and their gift to creation. To God, because surely the Holy One delights in being known and praised by those who know Him most intimately. To creation, because the Seraphim's constant proclamation reminds all beings of the truth that anchors existence, that God is holy, and this holiness fills all things. What do Seraphim do? They worship. Constantly, actively, fiercely, lovingly, transformatively. They burn with devotion and give voice to that burning in words that fill heaven and earth. They stand or hover or fly, as living testimony to the possibility of complete, undivided eternal orientation toward the divine. And they do this not as a burden, but as their joy. Not as a task, but as their nature. Not because they must, but because they are, in the deepest sense, made for this. The Seraphim at worship are the Seraphim being most fully themselves. And in that complete alignment between nature and action, between being and doing, they achieve a kind of perfection that lesser beings can only glimpse and admire. Rest now in the knowledge that their worship continues. The song goes on. The proclamation does not pause. The burning ones burn still with love that never diminishes, declaring holiness that never exhausts itself, engaged in work that never ends and never needs to end, because both the workers and the work are eternal. In the architecture of heaven, as imagined by theologians and mystics across the centuries, there exists an order, a hierarchy, a structure as intricate and beautiful as any cathedral raised by human hands. And within this celestial ordering, the Seraphim occupy a place of particular significance, not merely high, but highest, not merely close to the divine, but closest. To understand the Seraphim fully, one must understand where they stand in the great chain of being, and why they stand there. Rest now, and let the ordered beauty of heaven's structure unfold before your inner vision like a map of stars, each in its proper place, each serving its proper purpose. Christian angelology, the study and systematic understanding of angels, developed over centuries as theologians sought to make sense of the various beings mentioned in Scripture and to understand how they related to one another. Angels appear throughout the Bible in different forms, with different names, performing different functions. Some are messengers. Some are warriors. Some guard. Some worship. Some serve in ways humans can barely comprehend. The question naturally arose, are all these beings the same? Or do they differ in nature, in power, in closeness to God? And if they differ, how might they be ordered? What system might help us understand the relationships between cherubim and seraphim, between archangels and principalities, between thrones and dominions? One of the most influential attempts to answer these questions came from a mysterious writer known as Pseudo-Dionysius, or Dionysius the Areopagite. Writing sometime around the 5th or 6th century, this theologian produced a work called the Celestial Hierarchy, which would shape Christian thinking about angels for more than 1,000 years. Pseudo-Dionysius proposed a system of 9 orders of angels, arranged in 3 groups of three triads, each triad containing 3 orders. This 9-fold division created a structure that was both elegant and comprehensive, giving each type of angel its place while showing how divine light and love flowed from the highest to the lowest, from those nearest God to those nearest humanity. And at the very top of this hierarchy, in the first triad, closest to the divine throne, Pseudo-Dionysius placed the seraphim. Above the cherubim. Above the thrones. First among all angelic orders, highest in the celestial hierarchy, nearest to the source of all light and love and being. Why the seraphim? Why place these burning ones at the peak of heaven's order? The answer lies in what they do and what they are. The seraphim, as we have seen, worship constantly. They proclaim God's holiness without ceasing. They burn with love for the divine. And in Pseudo-Dionysius's system, closeness to God is determined by the degree of understanding, love, and direct illumination a being possesses. The seraphim understand most fully. They love most completely. They receive divine light most directly. Therefore, they stand highest. They are the first recipients of divine illumination, the first to know what God wishes to communicate, the first to be enkindled by divine fire. Let this ordered vision bring you peace. In heaven, all things have their place. All beings know their rank. And this knowing brings not resentment but harmony, not competition but cooperation. Each order serves according to its nature and capacity, and the whole system works together in perfect synchrony. The 3 triads that Pseudo-Dionysius proposed can be understood as 3 degrees of closeness to God. The first triad, seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, exists in immediate proximity to the divine, receiving illumination directly and participating most fully in the life of heaven. The second triad, dominions, virtues, and powers, governs and orders the cosmos according to divine will. The third triad, principalities, archangels, and angels, interacts more directly with the created world and with humanity. Within this structure, the seraphim occupy the highest position in the highest triad. They are, in the language often used to describe them, first of the first among angels. Not merely in the first triad, but first within that first triad. The supreme order. The ultimate rank. The closest possible proximity to God that any created being can achieve. This placement reflects the seraphim's nature as beings of burning love. In the medieval theological imagination, love was understood as the force that draws all things toward God, the gravity of the spiritual universe, the magnetism of the divine. And the seraphim, burning entirely with love, are drawn closest. Their love pulls them nearest to the source. Their fire reaches highest toward the flame that kindled them. Thomas Aquinas, the great 13th century theologian whose systematic thought would influence Catholic theology for centuries, affirmed this placement of seraphim at the highest rank. In his Summa Theologica, that vast compendium of theological knowledge, Aquinas explained that the seraphim hold the first place because of their supreme love. For Aquinas, the angelic orders could be distinguished by different perfections. Some excel in knowledge, some in power, some in governance. But the seraphim excel in love, and since love is the greatest of all virtues, the ultimate perfection toward which all others aim, the seraphim who possess it most fully must occupy the highest place. This is beautiful reasoning. It suggests that in heaven's hierarchy, the greatest power is not coercive force but loving devotion. The highest position is given not to those who command most effectively, but to those who love most completely. The burning ones, whose fire is the fire of love, stand highest because love itself is the highest thing. As you breathe slowly, letting your body relax more deeply, consider what this means. In the structure of heaven, love ranks above all else. Not knowledge alone, though knowledge matters. Not power alone, though power has its place. But love. And the seraphim, embodying this supreme love, show what it means to stand in the first place, not through domination but through devotion, not through grasping but through giving, not through pride but through the kind of humility that covers even their feet with wings. The seraphim's position at the top of the hierarchy also gives them a particular function. They communicate divine love to the lower orders. This is how Pseudo-Dionysius imagined the celestial hierarchy working, not as a rigid static structure but as a dynamic system through which divine illumination flowed downward, from higher to lower, each order receiving light and love from the order above it and passing it on to the order below. The seraphim, receiving love directly from God, pass it on to the cherubim. The cherubim, illuminated by both God and the seraphim, pass it on to the thrones. And so the divine light descends, moving through the ranks, each order serving as a conduit through which God's love and knowledge reach all of creation. In this system, the seraphim are not merely recipients but transmitters. They do not hoard the love they receive but share it. Their burning transforms into illumination for others. Their direct knowledge of divine holiness becomes, through their mediation, knowledge available to beings who stand at greater distance from the source. This makes the seraphim essential to the functioning of the entire celestial order. Without them, the flow would be blocked. Without them receiving and transmitting divine love, the lower orders would remain in darkness. The seraphim, by standing where they stand and doing what they do, make it possible for all of heaven to be enlightened, for all angels to participate in the divine love that they themselves receive most fully. Let this thought rest with you as you rest yourself. The highest position comes with the greatest responsibility, not to dominate but to serve, not to withhold but to share, not to stand apart but to connect. The seraphim model this kind of leadership, this kind of primacy that expresses itself through generosity. The phrase "first of the first" captures this perfectly. Not just first, but first among those who are first. Supreme within the supreme triad. Highest among the high. This is not a position earned through competition or seized through ambition. It is a position that reflects nature. The seraphim are what they are, and what they are makes them suited for this place above all others. Christian summaries of angelic hierarchy, whether in medieval texts or later devotional writings, consistently list the seraphim at the top. 9 choirs of angels, 9 orders, and the seraphim leading them all. This became standard teaching, repeated in sermons and treatises, illustrated in art and architecture, woven into the fabric of Christian cosmology. When medieval Christians looked up at the vaulted ceilings of their cathedrals, many of which were decorated with images of angels in ordered ranks, they would find the seraphim painted nearest to the representation of God, often in the highest position in the dome or apse. Visual art reinforced theological teaching. The seraphim stand highest because they love most fully. This hierarchical understanding also influenced devotional practice. If one wanted to pray for help in growing in love, one might invoke the seraphim. If one sought to have one's own heart kindled with divine fire, one might meditate on the burning ones and ask for their intercession, their example, their inspiration. The seraphim became, in Christian spirituality, the patrons of love, not romantic love or merely emotional affection, but caritas, the love that seeks the good of the other, the love that gives without counting cost, the love that burns without being consumed. As you sink deeper into tranquility, perhaps drifting towards sleep, hold lightly the image of this celestial order. The seraphim at the peak, burning with love. Below them, in ordered ranks, the other choirs of angels, each in its proper place. And flowing through all of them, from highest to lowest, the light and love of God, channeled, transmitted, shared, until all of heaven blazes with glory. The hierarchy is not about superiority and inferiority in the sense of worth or value. Every order of angels has dignity. Every rank serves an essential purpose. The structure exists not to create pride in the higher or shame in the lower, but to ensure that divine love reaches all beings in the manner best suited to their nature. The seraphim, standing where they stand, receive the most intense, direct, unmediated experience of divine love. And this is appropriate because they have the capacity for it. Their nature as burning ones means they can endure, even delight in, a closeness to divine fire that would overwhelm beings of different constitution. Lower orders of angels stand at greater distance, not because they are less loved, but because they are differently constituted. They receive divine light filtered through the seraphim and other high orders, modulated to match their capacity, appropriate to their function. And this too is a form of love, God's love adapted to meet each being where it is, in the manner it can best receive. Thomas Aquinas emphasized that the seraphim's supremacy in love makes them the most perfect of creatures. Since God is love, and all perfection consists in approaching closer to the divine nature, and love is the most direct way of approaching God, the seraphim, who love most perfectly, achieve the highest created perfection possible. This does not make them equal to God. They remain creatures, created beings, finite even in their glory. But within the realm of created things, they stand at the summit. They have reached, or rather been placed in, the highest position that created nature allows. And from this height, they look not downward with contempt but inward toward God with love, and outward toward other beings with a desire to share what they have received. The seraphim's height becomes the means by which divine love flows to others. Their first rank makes them first servers, first givers, first transmitters of the fire that consumes them. Rest in this knowledge, heaven is ordered by love. The highest position is given to those who love most. And even that high position is used not for self-aggrandizement but for service, receiving divine love and passing it on, being illuminated and becoming illumination for others, burning with fire and using that fire to kindle flames in hearts further from the source. The seraphim stand first. The seraphim stand highest. And in their standing, they show what it means to be great in heaven's eyes, to love completely, to give generously, to burn without ceasing, and to make one's very being a conduit through which divine love flows to all who have the capacity to receive it. The hierarchy holds. The order remains. And at the peak forever, the burning ones proclaim holiness and communicate love, first of the first, highest of the high, modeling for all creation what it means to stand in the presence of infinite love and be wholly transformed by the encounter. The vision of Isaiah belongs first to the Jewish tradition, and it is within Jewish thought that the seraphim first emerge into human consciousness. Yet the understanding of these burning ones did not remain static or singular across the centuries of Jewish reflection. Different teachers, different schools, different mystical systems approached the seraphim in their own ways, creating a rich tapestry of interpretation that honors both the mystery and the multiplicity of divine truth. Let yourself settle into this exploration of varied paths, where wisdom comes not from rigid certainty but from thoughtful diversity, where different voices offer different insights into the same eternal mystery. Jewish traditions have always recognized the seraphim as exalted beings. Isaiah's vision, preserved in the Hebrew scriptures, ensured that the burning ones would occupy a place in Jewish angelology, in Jewish liturgy, in Jewish meditation on the nature of heaven and its inhabitants. The Kedusha, that portion of Jewish prayer that echoes the Seraphim's cry of Holy, 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 keeps the Seraphim present in daily and Sabbath worship, reminding every generation of these beings who proclaim divine holiness without ceasing. But where exactly do the Seraphim fit in the hierarchy of heaven? On this question, Jewish thought offers answers that differ from the Christian ordering we have already explored. Not in contradiction precisely, but in perspective, seeing the same reality from a different angle, organizing the same data according to different principles. Moses Maimonides, the great 12th century Jewish philosopher and rabbi, created his own classification of angels in his monumental work, the Mishneh Torah. Maimonides, a rationalist thinker who sought to reconcile Jewish tradition with Aristotelian philosophy, proposed a system of 10 ranks of angels rather than 9. And in his system, the Seraphim appear not at the very top but in the 5th position. 5th out of 10. Still exalted. Still high in the hierarchy. But not supreme. Not first among all orders. This different placement reflects a different set of priorities, a different understanding of what constitutes the highest angelic nature. For Maimonides, the highest orders were those called by names like Chayo, living beings, Ophanim, wheels, and Erelim, terms drawn from various biblical visions, particularly Ezekiel's elaborate throne vision with its wheels within wheels and strange many-eyed creatures. The Seraphim, in Maimonides' system, occupy an important but not supreme position. They are powerful, certainly. Holy, without question. But the structure of heaven, as Maimonides understood it, placed other orders above them in the cosmic hierarchy. As you breathe slowly, letting your mind rest easy with this information, notice how different systems can honor the same beings in different ways. The Seraphim remain glorious whether they are counted 1st or 5th. Their nature does not change based on where human thinkers place them in their ordered lists. They simply are what they are, burning ones, proclaimers of holiness, and that essence remains constant across all systems of thought. Jewish mysticism, particularly in its Kabbalistic expressions, offers yet another approach to understanding the Seraphim. Kabbalah, that rich tradition of esoteric Jewish wisdom that flourished in medieval Spain and later in Safed and elsewhere, developed elaborate systems for understanding the relationship between the infinite divine, Ein Sof, and the finite creation, between the hidden God and the manifest world. Central to Kabbalistic thought is the concept of the Sefirot, 10 divine emanations or attributes through which God interacts with creation. These Sefirot are not separate gods but aspects or channels of the one divine reality, arranged in a structure often visualized as a tree, with roots in the infinite and branches extending toward the material world. In various Kabbalistic texts, the Seraphim become associated with specific Sefirot. Different teachers made different associations, reflecting the fluid and exploratory nature of mystical interpretation. Some texts link the Seraphim to Gevurah, the Sephira of divine power and judgment. Others connect them to Tiferet, the Sephira of beauty and balance. Still others see them as associated with Bina, the Sephira of understanding. These associations are not arbitrary. Each connection reveals something about how that particular teacher understood the Seraphim's function and nature. To link them with Gevurah is to emphasize their role as guardians, their fierce protection of holiness. To link them with Tiferet is to emphasize their beauty and their role in balancing divine attributes. To link them with Bina is to emphasize their profound understanding of divine mysteries. The diversity of these associations itself teaches something important. The Seraphim are rich enough, complex enough, mysterious enough to resonate with multiple aspects of the divine nature. They cannot be reduced to a single function or confined to a single role. They participate in multiple aspects of how God relates to creation. Let this multiplicity bring you a sense of spaciousness. Truth need not be singular to be true. Different perspectives can illuminate different facets of the same reality, like light passing through a prism and revealing colors that were always present but needed the proper angle to become visible. Some Kabbalistic texts place the Seraphim in Bariah, the world of creation, one of the 4 worlds that Kabbalah describes as levels of reality descending from the divine source. These 4 worlds, Atzilut, emanation, Bariah, creation, Yetzirah, formation, and Asiya, action, represent different degrees of manifestation, different distances from the pure divine essence. Bariah, the world of creation, is the highest of the 3 created worlds, the closest to Atzilut, which is the world of pure divine emanation. To place the Seraphim in Bariah is to say that they exist at the very threshold of creation, in that rarefied realm where created being emerges most directly from the creative divine impulse. They are the first creatures, in a sense, not first chronologically but first in terms of closeness to the source. This placement parallels, in its own way, the Christian understanding of seraphim as highest among angels. Both traditions, in their different vocabularies and frameworks, recognize that the seraphim occupy a position of extreme proximity to the divine. Whether this is described as first rank or as dwelling in Beriah, or as fifth among 10 orders, the underlying insight remains: these beings exist at the edge of what can be called created, at the boundary where finite meets infinite. But Jewish mystical taxonomies of angels maintain a different quality than many Christian systems. They remain fluid rather than rigid. There is less concern with establishing a fixed, unchangeable hierarchy and more interest in exploring how different angelic beings function, how they relate to different aspects of divine activity, how they serve different purposes in the great work of creation and providence. This fluidity reflects a broader characteristic of Jewish thought, a comfort with multiple opinions, a tradition of debate and dialogue, an understanding that truth often reveals itself through the interplay of different perspectives rather than through a single authoritative statement. In Talmudic discussions and midrashic elaborations, angels appear and are named and perform various functions, but their precise rankings and relationships remain somewhat open to interpretation. The emphasis falls more on what angels do than on where they stand. Function takes precedence over rank. Service matters more than status. The seraphim, in this context, are understood primarily through their activity in Isaiah's vision. They proclaim holiness. They serve as agents of purification. They mediate between the transcendent God and the prophet who needs to be prepared for his mission. These functions define them more than any position in a hierarchical chart. As you rest here, perhaps drifting closer to sleep, let this emphasis on function bring you peace. What matters is not where one stands but what one does with the position one occupies. The seraphim, whether ranked first or fifth or associated with this or that Sapphira, remain faithful to their calling. They burn. They worship. They proclaim. They serve. And in that faithful service, they fulfill their nature. Jewish mystical literature also explores the seraphim through the lens of the Merkava tradition, the mystical speculation about the divine chariot throne described in Ezekiel's vision. In these texts, which emerged in late antiquity and developed through the medieval period, heavenly palaces, heikalot, are described in elaborate detail, and various classes of angels are stationed in these palaces, performing different functions, singing different hymns, guarding different thresholds. In some of these texts, the seraphim appear as guardians of particular palaces or as singers of particular hymns. They are part of a vast celestial liturgy, a heavenly temple service that never ceases, where different angelic choirs perform different parts of an eternal worship service. The seraphim contribute their voices to this great symphony, their particular song being the threefold proclamation of holiness that Isaiah heard. This liturgical emphasis is natural given the origin of the seraphim in Isaiah's vision, which itself resembles a temple scene. The altar, the smoke, the sense of sacred space, all these elements evoke the Jerusalem temple where Isaiah may have received his vision. The seraphim, then, are celestial priests, performing heavenly liturgy in a heavenly sanctuary, their worship the model and source for earthly worship. Different Kabbalistic texts offer different maps of the angelic realm, and the seraphim appear in different positions on these maps. But what remains constant is the recognition of their holiness, their burning nature, their role in proclaiming and protecting the divine glory. The details of their rank may shift, their essential character does not. This variety in Jewish approaches to understanding the seraphim reflects a theological humility, an acknowledgement that human systems of classification, however useful, cannot fully capture the reality of the angelic realm. The seraphim exist. They serve God. They proclaim holiness. Beyond these basics, much remains mysterious, and different teachers may perceive or emphasize different aspects of that mystery. There is wisdom in this flexibility. It allows for ongoing exploration, continued discovery, new insights that need not overturn old ones but can coexist with them, each contributing to a fuller picture. The angelic realm, like the divine reality it reflects and serves, exceeds human comprehension. Our systems and hierarchies are aids to understanding, not exhaustive descriptions of reality. As you let yourself sink deeper into rest, consider the value of such flexibility. Not everything need be perfectly defined. Not every question requires a single definitive answer. Sometimes wisdom lies in holding multiple possibilities, in acknowledging that reality is richer and more complex than any single system can capture. The Seraphim, across Jewish thought from Maimonides to the Kabbalists to the Merkava mystics, remain beings of fire and holiness. Their rank may be debated. Their associations may vary. But their essential nature, their burning devotion, their proclamation of divine holiness, their role in mediating between heaven and earth, remains constant. In Jewish liturgy, when the congregation recites the Kaddish and declares together "Holy, holy, holy," they join their voices not just to memory but to present reality. The Seraphim still cry out. The proclamation still resounds. And human worship, in that moment, participates in the eternal worship of the burning ones, regardless of precisely where they stand in any hierarchical scheme. Function over ranking. Service over status. These emphases in Jewish mysticism offer a gentle corrective to any tendency to become too rigid in our classifications, too certain in our systematic arrangements. The Seraphim serve God. That is what matters most. The question of whether they are first or fifth becomes less important than the question of whether we, in our own small way, can learn from their example, their burning devotion, their ceaseless praise, their faithful service. Let the multiplicity of Jewish perspectives on the Seraphim expand your sense of possibility. There is room for different understandings. There is space for varied interpretations. The Seraphim remain glorious in Maimonides' fifth rank, luminous in the Kabbalists' association with different Sphirot, powerful in their placement in Beriah, faithful in their liturgical role in the heavenly palaces. All these views honor the same beings from different angles. All these systems attempt to understand the same mystery through different frameworks. And in their diversity, they demonstrate something important. The Seraphim, like all aspects of the divine realm, cannot be fully contained in any single human system of thought. The burning ones burn in their own right, according to their own nature, serving according to their own calling. And whether we count them first or fifth, whether we associate them with Gevurah or Tiferet or Bina, whether we place them in Beriah or in particular heavenly palaces, they remain what they are, beings of fire and holiness, proclaimers of the divine glory, servants of the one who is thrice holy. Rest in this knowledge. The Seraphim transcend our attempts to fully classify them. And in that transcendence, they remind us that mystery remains, that wonder continues, that heaven holds truths that exceed our grasp even as they illuminate our path. In the vast library of sacred texts, spanning centuries and cultures, filled with accounts of angels appearing to humans, bringing messages, offering protection, wrestling with patriarchs, announcing births, guarding gates, there is a remarkable absence. The Seraphim, those beings of fire who hover closest to the divine throne, rarely if ever appear in stories of direct human encounter. They exist, it seems, in a different register, oriented in a different direction, their attention and energy focused elsewhere. Let yourself settle into this exploration of distance and nearness, of beings who remain remote even as they touch human life in profound ways, and find in this a strange and gentle peace. The biblical record is clear on this point. Throughout the entire Hebrew Bible, throughout all its chronicles and prophecies, its poetry and wisdom, there is only one account of direct human interaction with a seraph. Only one. Isaiah's vision in the 6th chapter of the book that bears his name stands alone, a singular encounter, unrepeated, unique in all of Scripture. This rarity is itself significant. Angels appear frequently in biblical narratives. An angel stays Abraham's hand at the moment he would sacrifice Isaac. An angel wrestles with Jacob through the night. Angels appear to Lot in Sodom. An angel speaks to Hagar in the wilderness. Angels announce the birth of Samson, the birth of John the Baptist, the birth of Jesus. Angels minister to Elijah under the broom tree. An angel releases Peter from prison. Angels appear in dreams, in visions, in waking encounters. But seraphim? Only Isaiah. Only once. And even then, the encounter happens in a vision, in a moment of prophetic ecstasy, not in ordinary waking reality. Isaiah does not meet a seraph on the road or find one sitting in his house. He is transported, lifted up, brought into a vision of the heavenly throne room, and there in that sacred space the seraphim appear. This rarity speaks to the nature of the seraphim themselves. They are not messengers sent to earth. They are not guardians assigned to particular people or places in the human realm. They are not warriors dispatched to fight earthly battles. Their orientation is different. Their focus is elsewhere. The seraphim are oriented toward God. Their faces, when not covered by their wings, look toward the throne. Their voices cry out to one another, but the content of their cry concerns God's holiness, not human affairs. Their wings lift them in flight, but that flight keeps them hovering in the divine presence, not departing toward earthly destinations. In a sense, the seraphim have their backs to us. Not out of contempt or indifference, but simply because their attention is wholly captured by something, someone, more compelling, more beautiful, more worthy of their gaze than anything or anyone else. They look at God, and in looking, they see enough to occupy them for eternity. This orientation explains their rarity in human experience. They are not sent because sending them would require turning them away from their primary work, which is worship. They do not descend because their proper place is above the throne. They do not engage with humans regularly because their engagement is wholly with the divine. As you breathe slowly, letting your body relax more completely, consider the peace in this. Not every being need interact with us for us to benefit from their existence. The seraphim serve humanity precisely by not serving humanity directly, by maintaining the worship that keeps the cosmos oriented toward its center, by proclaiming the holiness that anchors all reality, by burning with love that warms all creation even from a distance. When the seraph does interact with Isaiah in that singular vision, the interaction is brief, purposeful, and clearly not the seraph's primary function. The seraph notices Isaiah's distress. "Woe is me, I am a man of unclean lips," and responds. Takes a coal from the altar, touches the prophet's lips, speaks words of cleansing. Then, presumably, returns to position, returns to worship, returns to the eternal work of proclaiming holiness. The entire encounter lasts perhaps seconds. A moment of attention diverted toward human need, then attention restored to its proper object. The seraph serves Isaiah, yes, but this service is incidental to the seraph's true work. It is as though the seraph, in the course of its worship, notices someone who needs preparation to stand in the holy presence and, almost without breaking stride, provides that preparation before continuing the eternal song. This is interaction, certainly. Direct, physical, or as physical as things can be in a vision, and transformative. The seraph touches Isaiah. Isaiah is changed. But even this direct encounter has an indirect quality. The seraph acts, but acts almost as a function of its worship rather than as a departure from it. The coal comes from the altar, from the very center of worship. The purification enables Isaiah to remain in the presence of holiness without being destroyed. Even the seraph's service to the prophet serves, ultimately, the preservation of holiness and the enabling of proper worship. Later writers, reflecting on Isaiah's encounter, would expand the episode into a model of spiritual purification. The burning coal became a symbol in Christian and Jewish spirituality of how God purifies souls. The touch of fire that cleanses rather than destroys became a metaphor for divine grace that transforms without annihilating human nature. Mystics and devotional writers meditated on what it must have felt like, that moment when holy fire touched mortal lips. Did it hurt? Did it burn with physical pain, or with the pain of seeing oneself clearly? Or did it somehow burn without pain, fire doing its purifying work with a mercy that transcended ordinary combustion? These reflections, beautiful as they are, remain extrapolations from a single brief moment in Scripture. The text itself is spare. A coal, a touch, words of purification, and Isaiah, freed from his paralysis, able to respond to the divine call. But this single moment became generative, giving rise to centuries of meditation on how divine fire purifies human souls, how heavenly power can touch earthly reality without destroying it, how beings of pure flame can mediate grace to creatures of mixed nature. The seraph's act, rare as it is, carries weight far beyond its brief duration. In liturgy, both Jewish and Christian, humans are understood to join seraphic worship in a mystical way. When the congregation sings the Sanctus or recites the Kaddish, they are not merely remembering what the seraphim once said. They are participating here and now, in the worship that the seraphim continue to offer. Their voices join, across the boundary between earth and heaven, with the voices of the burning ones. This is a form of interaction, but an indirect one. The seraphim do not turn to acknowledge the human worshippers. They do not pause in their eternal song to listen. But somehow, mysteriously, human worship connects with angelic worship. Earth joins heaven. Mortal voices blend with immortal ones. And for a moment, the boundary becomes permeable. Let yourself rest in this thought. You need not meet the seraphim face to face to benefit from their existence, to connect with their work, to participate in what they do. Even now, as you drift towards sleep or deeper rest, the seraphim continue their worship. And that worship sustains the cosmos, maintains the structure of reality, keeps the center from collapsing. This mystical joining through liturgy does not imply face-to-face encounter. No one expects the seraphim to appear visibly in church or synagogue when the Sanctus or Kadusha is sung. The joining is real but spiritual, actual but invisible, effective but not empirical. It operates on a different register than physical meeting. This is appropriate. The seraphim exist in a realm of such holiness that direct, unmediated encounter with them might overwhelm human consciousness. Isaiah's vision left him undone, crying out in anguish at his own unworthiness. And Isaiah was a prophet, someone already attuned to spiritual realities, already accustomed to hearing divine voices. For ordinary people, in ordinary states of consciousness, a direct encounter with a seraph might be unbearable. The rarity of seraph-human interaction, then, is not a deficiency but a mercy. It protects humans from exposure to a level of holiness they are not equipped to handle. It allows the seraphim to remain focused on their primary work. And it maintains the proper order of things, seraphim oriented toward God, other orders of angels oriented toward creation and humanity, each serving according to their nature and calling. Yet the one encounter we do have, Isaiah and the seraph, stands as a reminder that interaction is possible when necessary. When a human needs to be prepared for prophetic ministry, when someone must be purified to stand in the divine presence and hear a divine message, then a seraph can act. Will act. Does act. The burning ones are not so removed that they cannot, when needed, attend to human need. But such moments are rare because the need for them is rare. Most of us do not receive prophetic visions. Most of us do not stand in the heavenly throne room requiring purification from a coal taken from the celestial altar. Most of us live our lives at a comfortable distance from such overwhelming holiness. And this too is a gift. We are spared what we could not endure. We are protected by distance even as we are blessed by the seraphim's continued presence above the throne. They burn with love. They proclaim holiness. And we benefit from their work without needing to approach close enough to be scorched. As you settle more deeply into rest, perhaps you can sense the appropriateness of this arrangement. The seraphim do their work. You do yours. The two rarely intersect directly, but they are not unrelated. Their worship maintains the cosmos in which you live. Their proclamation of holiness establishes the reality within which your life unfolds. Their burning love warms all of creation, even those who never see the flame directly. In spiritual writings across the centuries, the image of the burning coal touching Isaiah's lips became a symbol people could carry with them. When they felt unworthy, when they struggled with guilt, when they needed assurance that purification was possible, they could remember, a seraph once touched a prophet's lips with holy fire, and the prophet was not destroyed but cleansed. This memory, this story, does more work than 1,000 direct encounters might do. It establishes a pattern, shows a possibility, offers hope. If Isaiah could be purified by seraphic fire, perhaps others can be purified by divine grace working through less dramatic means. If the seraphim could pause in their worship to cleanse a prophet, perhaps God's mercy extends to all who need it, mediated through whatever means are appropriate. The rarity of direct seraph-human encounter does not mean the seraphim are irrelevant to human life. It means they serve human flourishing in ways that do not require regular direct contact. Like the sun that warms the earth from vast distance, like the atmosphere that protects life without being consciously noticed, the seraphim perform their work at a distance that is nevertheless intimately connected to human welfare. Their worship maintains order. Their proclamation establishes truth. Their burning love creates, as it were, the spiritual climate in which souls can grow. All of this happens without most people ever seeing a seraph, ever hearing their voices directly, ever feeling the touch of heavenly fire on their lips. And perhaps this is exactly as it should be. Perhaps the greatest servants work in ways that do not draw attention to themselves. Perhaps the highest ministries are performed silently, invisibly, without fanfare or recognition. The seraphim do not seek human acknowledgement. They seek only to worship God and in worshiping, to serve the divine purposes that include but are not limited to human well-being. Let the seraphim remain at their distance. Let them continue their worship uninterrupted. Let their rare interactions with humanity remain rare. And find in this arrangement not coldness but wisdom, not distance but appropriate relationship, not absence but presence of a different kind, the presence that sustains from afar, that serves without seeking recognition, that burns with love even for those who never see the flame. You need not meet a seraph to benefit from their existence. You need not touch holy fire to be warmed by it. You need not hear their voices directly to be sustained by the truth they proclaim. The seraphim, oriented toward God, serving their eternal function, burning with ceaseless love, maintain the cosmos in which you rest, the order in which you live, the reality in which grace finds you and purifies you and prepares you for whatever calling is yours. Rest now in the knowledge that they continue their work. The song goes on. The worship does not cease. And you, sleeping or waking, are sustained by a celestial order you rarely see but from which you constantly benefit. The seraphim burn. Heaven worships. And all is as it should be. In the quiet spaces of theological inquiry, where careful reading meets honest acknowledgement of what texts do and do not contain, there lies an important practice, distinguishing between what is written and what is imagined, between what Scripture says and what later tradition infers. When it comes to seraphim and their relationship to darkness, to demons, to the great cosmic conflict between good and evil, the biblical texts maintain a striking silence, a silence that is itself worth contemplating. Let yourself rest in this exploration of absence and presence, of what is said and what is not said, and find peace in the restraint of sacred texts that honor mystery by not filling every gap with speculation. Scripture never depicts seraphim fighting demons. This simple statement, this clear absence, is worth sitting with for a moment. In a spiritual landscape where angels and demons appear frequently, where cosmic battles feature prominently in apocalyptic literature, where forces of good and evil clash in dramatic confrontations, the seraphim remain uninvolved in such conflicts, at least as far as the biblical record reveals. Angels fight. The book of Daniel speaks of angelic princes contending with one another. The book of Revelation describes war in heaven. But in these battles, other names appear. Michael, the great archangel, leads the heavenly armies. Gabriel appears as a messenger of particular power. Various unnamed angels perform various functions in the cosmic drama. But the seraphim? They are absent from these battle scenes. They do not appear wielding swords. They do not cast demons down. They do not engage in the kind of warfare that captures so much attention in later Christian imagination and art. This absence is telling. The seraphim, we recall, are oriented toward God. Their faces are covered in reverence. Their attention is consumed by worship. Their voices cry out proclamations of holiness. Their work is liturgical, not martial. They burn with love, not with battle fury. They hover above the throne, not charging into demonic hordes. To imagine them as warriors would require imagining them turning away from their primary function, redirecting their attention from God to demons, shifting from worship to warfare. And the texts simply never show this happening. As you breathe slowly, letting tension drain from your body, consider the peace in this. The seraphim remain at their post. They do not leave their station to fight. They maintain their worship regardless of what conflicts might rage elsewhere in the cosmos. Their constancy in worship is more important than any hypothetical role in spiritual warfare. In Revelation, that great apocalyptic vision at the end of the Christian New Testament, battle scenes unfold with vivid imagery. War broke out in heaven, the text declares. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. Here is cosmic conflict spelled out in explicit terms. Angels fighting demons. Good contending with evil. Heaven itself becoming a battlefield. But notice who is named, Michael the archangel. Not seraphim. Not cherubim. Michael and his angels. The seraphim, if they are present at all in this vision, and the text never says they are, remain unnamed, unmentioned, uninvolved in the battle narrative. This is not an oversight. Revelation draws heavily on earlier prophetic visions, including Isaiah's throne vision where seraphim appear. The author of Revelation knew the seraphim, could have included them, could have depicted them as celestial warriors burning through demonic ranks with holy fire, but didn't. Chose instead to name Michael, to focus on other angelic orders, to leave the seraphim in their proper place, above the throne, proclaiming holiness. There is wisdom in what texts leave out. Silence can be as instructive as speech. And the silence of Scripture regarding seraphim and demons suggests that whatever role the seraphim play in the cosmic order, it is not primarily about fighting darkness but about proclaiming light, not about destroying evil but about affirming goodness, not about warfare but about worship. Let this thought settle over you like a blanket. Not everything holy must be militant. Not every powerful being must be a warrior. The seraphim's power expresses itself differently, through love, through worship, through the transformation that comes from closeness to divine holiness. Scripture also provides no evidence that seraphim ever became demons. This too is worth noting, because later theological speculation would sometimes suggest otherwise. The question naturally arose: if some angels fell and became demons, could some seraphim have been among the fallen? The idea has a certain logic to it. If Satan himself was once an angel of high rank, as some traditions suggest, could he have been a seraph? If other angels followed Satan in rebellion, could some of them have been seraphim? The questions seem reasonable, but the biblical texts offer no support for these speculations. The story of angelic fall, of Lucifer's pride and rebellion, of angels cast down from heaven, draws on various biblical passages interpreted in particular ways. Isaiah 14 speaks of a fallen star, morning son of the dawn, cast down from heaven. Ezekiel 28 describes a guardian cherub who was in Eden, perfect until wickedness was found in him. Luke's Gospel has Jesus saying, "I watched Satan fall from heaven like lightning." Revelation describes the dragon and his angels being thrown down. But none of these passages mentions seraphim. Isaiah's fallen star is not explicitly identified as a seraph, despite appearing in a book that contains the only biblical description of seraphim. Ezekiel's fallen being is called a cherub, not a seraph, a different order of angelic being. The other references name Satan or the dragon or simply speak of fallen angels without specifying their original rank or nature. The absence of seraphim from these fall narratives is notable. One might expect that if seraphim had fallen, the texts would say so. The silence suggests that the burning ones, in biblical understanding, remain faithful. They continue their worship. They maintain their station. They do not rebel, do not fall, do not become demons. As you rest here, perhaps drifting closer to sleep, let this constancy bring comfort. Some beings remain faithful. Some fires keep burning with pure love. Some songs continue without corruption or cessation. The seraphim, as Scripture presents them, are among these constant ones. Later theological speculation, of course, did not always respect this textual silence. Some theologians, working out elaborate systems of angelic fall and demonic hierarchies, postulated the existence of fallen seraphim. If there are 9 orders of angels, they reasoned, and if demons are fallen angels, then perhaps there are 9 orders of demons corresponding to the 9 angelic orders. This would include fallen seraphim. But these ideas remain inferential, not textual. They are constructions of theological imagination rather than statements found in Scripture. They represent attempts to create symmetry, to fill gaps, to answer questions that the biblical texts leave unanswered. There is nothing inherently wrong with theological speculation. Human minds naturally wonder, question, explore. Theology involves reasoning about God and spiritual realities, drawing inferences, building systems of thought. But it is important to distinguish between what texts actually say and what later thinkers have inferred from those texts. The texts do not say seraphim fell. Later speculation suggests they might have. The difference matters. One is revelation, the other is inference. One comes with textual authority, the other with the weight of theological reasoning, which can be persuasive but remains human construction rather than divine disclosure. Let yourself relax more fully, releasing any need to know every detail, any anxiety about unanswered questions. Mystery is allowed. Gaps need not be filled. Some things the texts leave uncertain, and uncertainty need not disturb our peace. In traditions of exorcism, the practice of casting out demons, the focus falls consistently on Christ's authority, not on seraphic intervention. When Jesus confronts demons in the Gospels, he speaks with his own authority. When he gives his disciples power over demons, it is his name they invoke, his authority they exercise. When later Christian practice develops rituals of exorcism, these rituals call upon Jesus, appeal to the cross, invoke the Trinity, but do not summon seraphim to fight demons. This pattern reinforces what the texts suggest: the seraphim's role in the cosmic order does not center on demonic conflict. Their power is real, their holiness formidable, their fire capable of purification and transformation. But their power expresses itself primarily in worship and in making manifest the divine holiness, not in direct confrontation with evil spirits. Other angels serve as protectors, as guardians against demonic influence. Michael specifically is depicted as a warrior angel who contends with Satan. But the seraphim maintain a different function. They are too close to the divine center to be diverted to the periphery where demons operate. They are too consumed with worship to turn their attention to warfare. This division of labor in the celestial realm makes sense. Not every being must perform every function. The seraphim do what they do supremely well. They worship, they proclaim, they burn with love. Other orders handle other aspects of the divine work, including the confrontation and casting out of demons. As you breathe easily, preparing for sleep or simply sinking into deeper rest, notice how this division of roles brings order to the cosmos. The seraphim at the center, maintaining worship. Other angels at various distances, performing various functions. Each according to its nature. Each fulfilling its purpose. The whole system working together without confusion or conflict of roles. What the texts don't say can be as important as what they do say. Scripture's silence about seraphim fighting demons tells us something about seraphim, that their orientation is positive rather than reactive, creative rather than destructive, focused on affirming holiness rather than on confronting evil. Evil exists. Demons are real in biblical cosmology. Spiritual warfare happens. But not every holy being must be a warrior. The seraphim serve by being what they are, burning ones, worshippers, proclaimers of divine holiness. This service is enough. This function is complete. They need not also be demon fighters to be valuable, powerful, essential to the cosmic order. Later speculation about fallen seraphim likely arose from a desire to understand Satan's origin. If Satan was once powerful and glorious before his fall, as tradition suggests, then perhaps he was a seraph, highest among angels, burning with love that curdled into pride, a star that fell from the supreme height. But again, this remains speculation. Poetic perhaps. Theologically interesting. But not textual. The texts do not identify Satan as a fallen seraph. They use other language, other images, other titles. And this difference between textual statement and speculative inference must be maintained if we are to read Scripture honestly. Rest in the honesty of saying, the texts don't tell us when that is true. Rest in the humility of acknowledging the limits of what can be known from Scripture alone. Rest in the peace that comes from not needing to have every answer, not requiring every gap to be filled with elaborate theory. The seraphim, as Scripture presents them, remain uncorrupted. They continue their worship. They maintain their station above the throne. They proclaim holiness without ceasing. Whether some seraphim fell in prehistory is a question the texts simply don't address. And perhaps that silence is itself instructive. Perhaps what matters most is not speculating about hypothetical falls but attending to the faithful worship that continues, the burning love that remains constant, the proclamation that never wavers. In exorcism, in spiritual warfare, in confrontations with evil, Christians invoke Christ. Jews invoke the name of the Lord. Both traditions recognize that ultimate authority over demons belongs to God, and that human practitioners participate in that authority as it is delegated to them. The seraphim need not be invoked because they are not the ones who directly engage with demons in the biblical narrative. This is not a failure of the seraphim. It is simply not their role. They serve in other ways, maintaining the worship that keeps the cosmos oriented toward its center, proclaiming the holiness that establishes what is true and real, burning with love that warms all creation. Let them continue this work, uninterrupted by speculations that would turn them into warriors they are not shown to be. As you prepare to release consciousness, to drift into sleep or into that quiet state between waking and sleeping, let go of any need for the seraphim to be what texts don't show them to be. Let them be what they are, worshippers, proclaimers, burning ones whose constancy serves the cosmos in ways both profound and subtle. The texts are clear about what they say. The texts are silent about much else. And in both the clarity and the silence, there is peace. The seraphim worship. That is enough. That is everything. And in their worship, uncorrupted and ceaseless, they fulfill their purpose and contribute to the ordering of all that is. As centuries passed and contemplatives sat in quiet cells, as mystics pursued union with the divine through prayer and fasting and love, the seraphim underwent a kind of transformation in human imagination. Not that the seraphim themselves changed. They continue their eternal worship, burning with the same love they have always known. But the way humans understood them, the way they used them as models and symbols, evolved into something rich and beautiful. The seraphim became less about narrative encounters and more about spiritual ideals, less about beings to be met and more about states of soul to be achieved. Settle into this exploration of how fire becomes metaphor, how beings become symbols, how the Seraphim's burning love illuminates the path of human devotion, and let their example bring gentle warmth to your spirit as you rest. In the flowering of Christian mysticism during the medieval period, when monasteries became workshops of prayer and convents sheltered souls devoted entirely to divine love, the Seraphim found a new role. They became models of contemplative love, the highest expression of what a human soul might aspire to become in its relationship with God. Contemplatives are those who seek God not primarily through action or intellectual study, though these have their place, but through love. Through sitting in silence, through opening the heart, through allowing themselves to be drawn upward by desire for the divine. And when these contemplatives looked for models of such love, they naturally turned to the Seraphim. Who better to exemplify burning love than beings whose very name means burning ones? Who better to show what total devotion looks like than creatures who spend eternity proclaiming God's holiness without pause? Who better to model the complete orientation of the self toward God than angels who cover their faces and feet in humility while directing all their energy toward worship? The Seraphim became, in mystical literature, the ideal of what the soul in love with God might become. Not literally transformed into an angel, but spiritually conformed to the angelic pattern of pure, burning, undivided love. To be seraphic became a term with specific meaning in Christian spirituality. It meant to burn with love for God. Not a tepid affection, not a mild preference, but a consuming fire of love that transformed the entire person, that left no corner of the heart unwarmed, that blazed with an intensity that recalled the burning ones themselves. A seraphic soul was one utterly given over to divine love. One whose prayers were not duties but delights. One whose contemplation kindled warmth that spread through the whole being. One whose devotion burned steadily, constantly, the way the Seraphim's worship continues without ceasing. As you breathe slowly, letting your body sink deeper into rest, imagine what such burning love might feel like. Not as discomfort or destruction, but as warmth that penetrates to the core, as light that illuminates from within, as fire that purifies without consuming. The seraphic ideal is not torment but joy, not suffering but the deepest satisfaction of the soul finding its true home in God. One figure stands out particularly in this tradition of seraphic spirituality: Bonaventure, a 13th-century Franciscan theologian and mystic. Bonaventure wrote extensively about the journey of the soul toward God, about the stages of contemplative ascent, about the nature of divine love and how humans might participate in it. His writings are marked by warmth, by affection, by a sense that theology should not be cold intellectual exercise but passionate pursuit of the beloved. And so profound was his emphasis on love, so central was burning devotion to his entire theological project, that he received a special title, the Seraphic Doctor. Among medieval theologians, various individuals received distinctive titles marking their particular contributions or emphases. Thomas Aquinas was the angelic doctor for his systematic brilliance. Albert the Great was the universal doctor for his wide-ranging knowledge. But Bonaventure was the seraphic doctor, the teacher whose very essence seemed to burn with the same love that consumes the seraphim. This title was not merely honorary. It captured something essential about Bonaventure's approach to knowing God. For him, the highest knowledge came not through intellectual analysis alone but through love. The mind could study God certainly, but only the heart on fire with love could truly know God. And so Bonaventure oriented his entire theology toward kindling such love in his readers, toward drawing souls upward into the flames of divine charity. Let this thought rest gently in your awareness as you drift toward deeper quiet. Knowledge through love. Understanding through burning. A way of knowing that engages the whole person, not just the intellect. The seraphic path Bonaventure described is one where the heart leads and the mind follows, where love illuminates and understanding deepens in the warmth of devotion. In Bonaventure's most famous work, The Soul's Journey into God, he describes 7 stages of ascent, 7 steps by which the soul climbs toward union with the divine. And though all 7 matter, the highest stages are characterized by increasingly seraphic love, love that burns away everything unlike itself, love that transforms the lover into the image of the beloved, love that finally achieves a kind of mystical union where the soul loses itself in God like a log consumed in flame. This is seraphic spirituality in its fullness. Not mere admiration for the seraphim from afar, but aspiration to share in their nature, to become in one's own human way, a burning one, aflame with love for God. Other mystics besides Bonaventure used seraphic imagery and aspired to seraphic love. Francis of Assisi, Bonaventure's spiritual father, received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ, in a vision that involved a seraph. The seraph appeared with 6 wings, and from between those wings came the image of the crucified Christ. Francis, already burning with love for Jesus, received the marks of crucifixion on his own body, becoming literally marked by the encounter with seraphic love. This story, whether understood as literal miracle or powerful symbol, captures the transformative power of the seraphic ideal. To draw near to seraphic love, to truly seek to burn with the same devotion that consumes the burning ones, is to be changed. The fire leaves its mark. The heat transforms. And those who pursue this path find themselves becoming different, more loving, more devoted, more consumed by divine charity. As you rest here, breathing easily, let yourself be warmed by this thought without being burned. The seraphic ideal can inspire without intimidating. It can draw the heart upward without demanding immediate perfection. Even a small flame partakes of fire's nature. Even a modest warmth shares something with the burning that consumes the seraphim. In this mystical and devotional tradition, the seraphim largely ceased to be narrative characters. They were not beings one expected to meet or interact with in the way one might pray to a patron saint or call on an angel for protection. Instead, they became symbols, living symbols certainly, still real beings in heaven, but functioning in human spirituality more as ideals than as potential helpers. This shift from narrative to symbol is not a loss. Symbols carry power of their own. They orient the imagination. They provide targets for aspiration. They give shape to longings that might otherwise remain vague and undefined. To have the seraphim as symbols of burning love gives contemplatives a clear image to hold before their inner eye, a pattern to aspire to, a model that remains constant across centuries and cultures. The 6 wings of the seraphim became symbolic in themselves. 2 covering the face, representing humility and reverence. 2 covering the feet, representing acknowledgement of one's creatureliness and lowliness before God. 2 for flight, representing readiness to serve, willingness to act, the active dimension of love. Mystics would meditate on these 3 pairs of wings as representing 3 aspects of the spiritual life. The contemplative must have reverence, must approach God with appropriate awe, must maintain humility before the Holy One. The contemplative must have humility about self, must acknowledge human limitation, must not presume on God's favor. And the contemplative must have active love, must not remain passive but must serve, must fly on wings of charity toward both God and neighbor. The entire spiritual life could be understood through this seraphic pattern. And many mystics found this pattern helpful, found in it a structure for understanding their own journey toward God. Let this pattern rest in your mind as you prepare for sleep. Reverence, humility, active love, 3 pairs of wings, 3 dimensions of authentic spirituality. The seraphim, even as symbols, teach by their very form. In art and iconography, seraphim began appearing in particular ways that reflected this symbolic understanding, often shown as distinctly red or flame-colored, emphasizing their burning nature. Often depicted with 6 wings in elaborate arrangements, sometimes covering face and feet as scripture describes. Sometimes shown holding symbols of divine love, a burning heart, a torch, a flame. These images served devotional purposes. A monk meditating in his cell could look at an image of a seraph and be reminded to kindle his own heart's fire. A nun at prayer could contemplate the seraphic symbol and aspire to similar devotion. The visual representation reinforced the spiritual ideal. But always, in this mystical and devotional use of seraphim as symbols, there remained awareness that these were real beings, not merely abstract concepts. The seraphim existed. They truly burned with love. They actually proclaimed God's holiness without ceasing. Their reality grounded the symbol. Their nature validated the ideal. To aspire to seraphic love was not to chase a fantasy, but to reach towards something actual, a kind of love that truly existed in the cosmos, demonstrated eternally by beings whose whole existence embodied it. As you drift deeper into rest, perhaps you can sense the warmth of this ideal even now. Not as pressure to achieve or perform, but as gentle invitation to open yourself more fully to love, to allow the small flame of devotion in your own heart to burn a bit brighter, to orient yourself, even in your limitations, toward the same divine center that captivates the seraphim. The seraphic tradition in Christian mysticism ultimately teaches that love is the highest path. Higher than knowledge, though knowledge has its place. Higher than power, though power can serve good ends. Higher than duty, though duty matters. Love, burning, transformative, all-consuming love for God, stands as the ultimate goal of the spiritual life, the peak of the mystical ascent, the essence of what it means to become fully what humans are meant to be. And the seraphim, in their eternal burning, in their ceaseless proclamation, in their complete orientation toward God, show what this love looks like in its purest form. They are not merely beings to know about but patterns to follow, not merely objects of study but models of devotion, not merely heavenly entities but spiritual ideals made manifest in celestial form. To Cole Bonaventure, the seraphic doctor, was to say that his teaching kindled love, that his words warmed hearts, that his theology was not cold analysis but hot pursuit of union with God. And that title has endured precisely because it captures something essential not just about Bonaventure but about the entire tradition he represents, a tradition that sees the spiritual life primarily as a journey into love, a path of increasing heat, a transformation into fire. Let yourself be drawn, gently and without force, toward this warmth. You need not achieve seraphic perfection. You need not burn with the intensity of the angels. But you can allow whatever small flame exists in your heart to be tended, to be fed, to grow gradually brighter. This is enough. This is the seraphic path scaled to human capacity, not overwhelming fire but steady warmth, not consuming blaze but constant light. The seraphim as symbols, as models, as ideals in mystical devotion serve to orient countless souls toward love. They provide an image that captures the imagination. They embody a possibility that inspires the heart. They demonstrate that complete devotion is real, that burning love exists, that total orientation toward God is not merely theoretical but actual, lived out eternally by beings who know nothing else and desire nothing else. Rest in this knowledge. The seraphim continue their burning. Their love does not diminish. Their devotion does not waver. And their example, preserved in mystical writings and devotional practices across centuries, continues to kindle warmth in human hearts, continues to inspire souls to love more fully, continues to show what it means to burn, gently or intensely, according to capacity, with love for the divine. The transformation from narrative characters to powerful symbols does not diminish the seraphim. If anything, it extends their influence. As symbols of contemplative love, they touch more lives than they ever could as beings encountered in rare visions. As models of burning devotion, they inspire more souls than direct interaction ever would. Their symbolic power serves the same divine purposes their literal nature serves, drawing creation toward the Creator, kindling love, proclaiming holiness through the lives of those who take them as ideals. Let the seraphim be both for you, real beings in heaven, continuing their eternal worship, and powerful symbols of love that can shape your own spiritual journey. Both are true. Both are valuable. And both work together to draw you, gently and patiently, toward the warmth that is God's own nature, the fire that does not destroy but perfects, the love that burns eternally and invites all who will to share, according to their capacity, in its transforming flame. In the modern age, where stories flow through screens and pages at unprecedented speed, where imagination mingles freely with tradition, where ancient symbols find new life in fantasy and fiction, the seraphim have undergone yet another transformation. Not in their true nature, they remain what they have always been, burning ones above the throne, but in how popular culture envisions them, depicts them, puts them to work in narratives far removed from Isaiah's vision or medieval mysticism. To understand the seraphim fully, one must acknowledge both what they are and what modern imagination has made of them. Let yourself settle into this final exploration, this gentle examination of how ancient fire meets contemporary creativity, and find peace in distinguishing between timeless truth and imaginative play. Modern portrayals of seraphim often blend elements from different biblical visions, creating composite beings that draw on multiple sources. The seraphim of Isaiah's vision, six-winged, proclaiming holiness, merge with the cherubim of Ezekiel's vision, those strange creatures with 4 faces and wheels beside them, covered with eyes. The result is beings that are more elaborate, more complex, more visually striking than any single biblical description provides. In contemporary art, whether digital paintings shared online or illustrations in graphic novels, seraphim might appear with multiple wings, yes, but also with wheels of fire rotating around them, with eyes scattered across their forms, with attributes borrowed from Ophanim and cherubim and other heavenly beings all combined into a single awesome figure. This blending reflects a modern appetite for the spectacular, for imagery that overwhelms and amazes. And there is beauty in these composite visions. They capture something of the strangeness and power that ancient people felt when encountering descriptions of heavenly beings. But they are not faithful to any single biblical text. They are creative syntheses, imaginative combinations that prioritize visual impact over textual accuracy. As you breathe slowly, letting your body relax more fully, Notice how this creative freedom both reveals and obscures. It reveals the continued fascination with heavenly beings, the enduring sense that there are powers and presences beyond ordinary human experience. But it obscures the specific nature of the seraphim as Isaiah described them, blurring distinct orders of angels into a general category of biblically accurate angels that are, ironically, not entirely accurate to any specific biblical account. Modern depictions sometimes show seraphim as wheels, rotating rings of fire, perhaps with eyes around the rim, moving in impossible geometries. This draws primarily from Ezekiel's vision of the Ophanim, the wheels beside the cherubim, rather than from Isaiah's description of six-winged beings. But in popular imagination, seraphim becomes a catch-all term for any strange, powerful, non-humanoid angelic entity. Other portrayals present seraphim as dragons or serpentine beings, drawing perhaps on the linguistic connection between seraph and fiery serpents, or on ancient Near Eastern guardian imagery, or simply on the association of fire with dragons in fantasy literature. These seraphim coil and writhe, breathe flame, possess scales or feathers or both, embody power in reptilian or avian forms that seem primal and dangerous. Still other modern images show seraphim as humanoid figures crowned or surrounded by flame, their bodies perhaps semi-translucent, radiating light, multiple wings spreading from their shoulders or backs. These versions maintain more connection to traditional Christian iconography while amplifying the fire imagery, making the burning ones literally appear to be made of or clothed in flame. Each interpretation has its own visual poetry. Each captures some aspect of what seraphim might represent: power, otherness, holiness, fire. But taken together, they demonstrate how diverse modern imagination has become in its approach to these beings, how willing contemporary culture is to experiment with forms and imagery in ways that earlier ages, more constrained by tradition and doctrine, might not have permitted. In fiction and games, in fantasy novels, role-playing games, video games, movies, seraphim often appear as demon slayers or elite warriors. This is perhaps the most dramatic departure from biblical depiction. As we have seen, Scripture never shows seraphim fighting demons. But modern narratives, which often require clear conflicts and dramatic battles, have cast the seraphim in martial roles. In these stories, seraphim might be the most powerful class of angels, deployed only against the greatest demonic threats. They might wield flaming swords or breathe holy fire that incinerates evil. They might serve as commanders of heavenly armies or as solo warriors of devastating power. Their presence on a battlefield might turn the tide of cosmic war. These portrayals are exciting. They make for compelling narratives. Characters might call upon seraphim in moments of desperate need. Heroes might encounter seraphim as allies or, in darker stories, as overwhelming forces that humans can barely comprehend. The narrative possibilities are rich and engaging. But it is important to recognize these depictions for what they are: imaginative expansions, not ancient doctrine. They represent what modern storytellers think would be interesting or dramatic, not what biblical texts or historical theology actually teach about seraphim. They are creative license taken with traditional material, reshaping it to serve contemporary narrative needs. Let this distinction rest easily in your mind as you drift toward deeper quiet. Imagination is allowed. Creativity is valuable. Stories can take traditional elements and reshape them in new ways. But when we confuse these modern inventions with ancient truth, we lose something important: the ability to encounter the seraphim as they were originally understood, to hear Isaiah's vision on its own terms, to appreciate what Scripture actually says about these mysterious beings. The biblical seraphim remain mysterious. This is perhaps their most consistent characteristic across all authentic descriptions. They are not explained in detail. Their nature is not analyzed exhaustively. They appear briefly, do their work, and fade back into the mystery from which they emerged. Isaiah sees them, receives their ministration, and the vision moves on. Scripture preserves this quality of mystery, leaving much unsaid, much unexplained. Modern portrayals often try to fill in these gaps, to provide details Scripture doesn't give, to make the seraphim fully knowable and comprehensible. But in doing so, they sometimes lose the mystery that is itself part of the seraphim's nature. The burning ones, properly understood, resist complete comprehension. They exceed our categories. They remain partly veiled, partly incomprehensible, like looking at light too bright for comfortable vision. The biblical seraphim are also rare. They appear in one vision, one chapter of one book. This rarity gives them weight. Each appearance matters because appearances are so infrequent. But modern media, which needs recurring characters and recurring imagery, often makes seraphim more common. They show up in multiple episodes, multiple books, become familiar through repetition. This familiarity, while perhaps making them more accessible to modern audiences, diminishes something essential about the seraphim: their exceptional nature, their quality of being beings one does not casually encounter, their status as creatures so exalted that meeting them marks a person forever. And the biblical seraphim are overwhelming. Isaiah's response to seeing them is not wonder or curiosity, but terror and self-recognition of his own unworthiness. Woe is me! I am lost. The seraphim, in their holiness and power, undo the prophet. They reveal to him his own inadequacy. Their presence is not comforting but overwhelming, not gentle but fierce in its purity. Modern portrayals sometimes domesticate this overwhelming quality. They make seraphim allies, helpers, beings humans can interact with comfortably. They remove the terror and leave only wonder. But in doing so, they lose something of what it means to encounter authentic holiness, to stand before beings who exist so much closer to divine fire that merely being near them requires purification. As you rest here, breathing slowly, preparing perhaps for sleep, let yourself remember the authentic seraphim, not the warriors of fiction, not the composite beings of modern art, but the six-winged proclaimers of holiness in Isaiah's vision. Simple in their function, mysterious in their nature, overwhelming in their effect. There is value in modern reinterpretations. They keep ancient images alive in contemporary consciousness. They introduce new generations to the idea of seraphim, even if the introductions come through fantasy novels or video games. They demonstrate the continuing power of these symbols to capture imagination and inspire creativity. But there is also value in returning to sources, in reading Isaiah 6 again with fresh eyes, in letting the biblical seraphim be what they are without the accretions of later imagination. In that original vision lies something that no modern elaboration can improve upon: the starkness of the encounter, the simplicity of the description, the power of the proclamation. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. These words, spoken by beings who exist primarily to speak them, carry their own authority. They need no dramatic battle scenes to make them interesting. They need no elaborate physical descriptions to make them compelling. They are enough in themselves: the seraphim's cry, the shaking foundations, the smoke filling the temple, the prophet undone and then restored by a coal from the altar. Let modern imagination have its play. Let artists and writers and game designers create their versions of seraphim, their composite beings, their warrior angels, their dramatic cosmic battles. These serve their own purposes in contemporary culture. But let these not replace or obscure the original, the burning ones as Scripture presents them, mysterious and rare and overwhelming, oriented entirely toward God, proclaiming holiness without ceasing. In the quiet of night, as consciousness releases its grip and the body surrenders to rest, there is space to hold both. Modern creativity and ancient truth. Contemporary reimagining and biblical simplicity. The seraphim of fiction and the seraphim of Isaiah. Each has its place. Each offers something of value. But the distinction between them matters, and maintaining that distinction allows us to appreciate both what the seraphim truly are and what human imagination has made of them. The biblical seraphim continue their worship, unchanged by how modern culture depicts them. Their burning is not affected by whether artists portray them accurately. Their proclamation continues regardless of how fantasy novels characterize them. They are what they are, independent of human interpretation, beyond human alteration. And perhaps there is comfort in this. In a world where everything seems fluid, where images multiply and mutate at digital speed, where ancient symbols get remixed and reimagined constantly, the actual seraphim remain constant. Above the throne, proclaiming holiness, burning with love, doing now what they have always done, will always do, unchanged and unchangeable. Let yourself rest in that constancy as you drift toward sleep. The seraphim are real, whatever forms imagination gives them. Their worship continues, whatever stories fiction tells about them. Their fire burns pure, whatever blend of attributes modern art assigns to them. Behind all the reinterpretations and reimaginings stands the simple, profound reality: burning ones who proclaim God's holiness without ceasing. Modern portrayals will continue to evolve. New artists will create new visions. New writers will tell new stories. The seraphim of popular culture will keep changing, adapting to new contexts, serving new narrative purposes. This is the nature of how symbols work in living cultures. They grow, they change, they acquire new meanings while hopefully retaining connection to their origins. But through all these transformations, the original remains available. Isaiah's vision can still be read. The biblical text preserves the essential encounter. And those who wish to meet the seraphim as Isaiah met them, not as warriors or composite beings but as six-winged proclaimers of holiness, can return to that source, can read those words, can imagine themselves standing where Isaiah stood, overwhelmed by the presence of beings too holy for easy comprehension. As you settle into final rest, whether sleep comes now or later, hold lightly the image of the true seraphim. 6 wings. 3 pairs with their purposes, covering, flying. Voices crying out in antiphon. The altar with its burning coals. The throne above which they hover. And most essentially their orientation, not toward us but toward God, not toward earth but toward heaven, not concerned with human affairs but consumed with divine glory. Let them remain mysterious. Let them remain rare. Let them remain overwhelming. And let modern imagination play with their image while the reality behind the image continues unchanged, eternal, faithful to its ancient calling, to burn with love, to proclaim holiness, to worship without ceasing the one who sits enthroned above all creation. The seraphim were, are, and will be. And you, resting now, are sustained by a cosmos in which such beings exist, in which worship continues without pause, in which love burns eternally before the throne of holiness. Whatever forms imagination gives them, whatever stories culture tells about them, the truth remains, burning ones, proclaiming glory, faithful forever. Rest now in that faithfulness. Sleep in that constancy. And let the seraphim, both as they truly are and as imagination envisions them, fade gently from conscious thought as you surrender to rest, knowing that their worship continues while you sleep, their song goes on while you dream, their fire burns bright while you, for a time, let go of all things and simply rest in the peace of night.